The candle on Vlad's desk did not flicker. The world did. He had been reading a letter 3 centuries old, in a hand he had not loved for 2 of them, when the line came open under his ribs. Not a sound, not a vision. A pull, like a thread tied to a finger he had forgotten he possessed. Somewhere in the soft western country, a kinswoman of his blood had died, and the line had asked him a question. He set the letter down. He set his hand flat on the wood, against the grain of it, against the year-rings of a tree that had outlived 4 kings, and he listened. Lily. He did not remember which generation he had last counted. The Moravis line had thinned to a thread, and he had let it. Some bonds one did not press. The girl had been born in the soft places of England, where they did not know they were Wallachia and would not have liked to be told. He had known her name from the registers, and he had let her live her life in peace. She was no longer living any life. He rose. The chamber knew him. The corridors knew him. He passed through stone that had been his since before the boy king Mihai had ruled and not ruled in turn, and he did not hurry. For hurry was an indulgence of the young. Adrian was in the library. Father. The Dampier looked up from a low table where he had been writing in his mother's hand. He saw Vlad's face and set the pen aside. Who? A cousin, distant, the Moravis thread. There is a thread alive. There was, an hour ago. The Count turned to the window without seeing the snow that had begun. There is a child. Adrian rose to his full height. He had been 400 years old that spring and still kept his mother's careful eyes. How distant, distant enough to be claimed, close enough to be obligated. Is the boy in danger? The Count did not answer at once. He had felt the shape of the thing that had killed the kinswoman. A small, sharp soul. A soul not satisfied with the killing. A soul that had wanted, after the killing, to keep going. A soul that was even now reaching for the child and finding the child intact, which was a wonder, and which meant the kinswoman had spent the last hour of her life laying down a working of love so old that even a thing with no patience for love had been knocked back from it. He is in danger. The Count said, and he is alive, I will go. Adrian was already at the rack. He drew down the Count's travelling coat. Take Hector. No, father, it is not a battle, it is a recovery. I will not bring a forgemaster to a recovery. You will not bring me either. No, Adrian did not press. He had learned 2 centuries ago when not to press. He laid the coat across his arm and walked with his father to the great door where the iron knew them. He helped the Count with the collar. He stood back. What was her name? He asked. Lily. She was called Lily. She married a man called Potter. And the child? Harry. The boy is called Harry. Adrian looked once at the snow outside the great door and once at his father, and he said, Bring him home. The Count went. He travelled the way old houses travelled when they did not wish the world to know. There were no sounds at his passage. There were no lights. A drift of cold air through a chapel in Buda. A blown-out lantern at the docks of Hamburg. A shutter in Calais that opened and closed without a hand. A bell in Dover that rang once for no reason a verger could explain. He came to Godric's Hollow in the last of the snow. The house at the end of the lane was burning, not as houses burn. As a working of magic burns when it has been disturbed at the load-bearing rune and is now spending itself in heat. There was no smoke. There was a light. The roof had gone in at the upper corner. The white stone of the chimney was sooted black. And inside, on the stairs, a man lay on his back with his arm out, as though pointing at something that had not bothered to look. The Count knelt at the threshold. He did not enter at once. He laid his palm flat to the doorjamb. He listened. A child was crying upstairs. A great deal of magic had been spent in the room above, and it was the kind of magic that left a stain. Blood magic. Mother magic. Old work. The Wallachia line knew it. The Count had used it himself once, and once was enough. He stood up. He went in. The man on the stairs had been very young. The Count did not stop. He climbed past the body with his eyes lowered, in the manner of a guest who has come to a house in mourning and will not look at what is not his to look at. At the top of the stair, the door stood open. He went through. The woman was on the floor. She had set herself between the door and the cradle, and she had not moved. The cradle had a child in it. The child was sitting up. The child had a cut across his forehead, a thin line that bled and did not bleed, like a stitched seam pulled tight. The child was crying without sound, the way children cry when they have been crying long enough to be tired of it. The Count crossed the room to the woman first. He went to one knee. He put a hand to her hair. He did not need to feel for a pulse. He had felt the pulse leave the line an hour ago. He bent his head. "Cousin," he said very low, in a language she would not have recognized in life. "The boy is in my keeping." He rose. He went to the cradle. The child looked up at him with green eyes. The eyes of the Moravis women, every other generation, green and steady and old-souled. The child had stopped crying. The child stared. "Hello, little one," said the Count. The child reached up. The Count gathered him. He was practiced. He had held a son. He held this small one against his shoulder, felt the wet heat of the boy's face against his neck, felt also, with the part of him that read working, the residue of the mother's last spell along the child's brow. A scar that was a door that had closed, something behind it that was not the child. He did not look at it. He would look at it later. He laid his coat over the boy. He turned. He went back to the woman on the floor. He did not kneel again. He spoke in Old Slavic, because the line would hear in Old Slavic if it heard at all. "I take him to the castle. I take him as the line is owed. He will be kept and he will be taught and he will not be hated. By my hand and my house." He waited. The room did not answer. He had not expected it to. He went out. On the lane outside, a great noise was coming. A man on a flying motorcycle descending with a deal of bother. The Count did not move. He stood by the gate, with the child wrapped against his chest, and watched the skyrider come down into the lane in a thump of frost-stiffened grass. The rider was very large. The rider had a beard that had not been combed in some hours. The rider had been crying, "You." The giant began. He had the sense to stop. He looked at the Count's coat, which was the coat of a man who did not appear to be there. He looked at the bundle. He looked at the burning house. He took a step and stopped. Who are ye?" "My name is Dracula," said the Count, in English so old it had no accent in any place. "I am here for the boy. You're not having him?" The giant did not say this with rancor. He said it like a man saying something that had been told to him to say. "Albus Dumbledore has sent you. He has. You are early." The Count said gently, "I am earlier." He produced, from inside the coat, a folded parchment, very old, with a wax seal in red that had a dragon coiled into a circle. He held it out. The giant took it in a hand that could have held 3 of it. He squinted at it. He had not been taught to read this hand. "It is a compact," said the Count, "between the line of Moravis and the line of Dracula, signed in 1471. The child's mother was of the Moravis. The compact says, 'In the absence of a living guardian of the line, the eldest of Dracula takes the orphan. I am the eldest, I take him.' Professor Dumbledore," said the giant slowly, "said I was take him his aunt. His aunt is not of the line, she's his mum's sister." "The line is not English," said the Count, very gently. "The line is older than English. The line knows what it knows. The boy is mine to keep until he is grown. You may tell Albus Dumbledore that he is welcome to find me. I am not difficult to find, I am only difficult to reach." The giant looked at the parchment. He looked at the bundle in the Count's coat. The child's eyes were closed. The child was asleep against the Count's collarbone, in the way a child can sleep through a great noise if the noise has been long enough. "He's a little one," said the giant. "He is 6 months on his 2nd year, yes. I were going to ride him on the bike. He will sleep better in a coach." The giant rubbed his nose with the back of his wrist. He did not let go of the parchment. He looked at the burning house and at the sky and at his motorcycle, which had begun to settle on its haunches like a tired dog. "Professor Dumbledore," he said, "is not going to like this." "No," said the Count, "he is not. He's a great man. He may be. He'll want to see ye. He will write a letter. The letter will reach me. I will answer it." The Count inclined his head. The gesture was not English in any of its lines. "Rubius Hagrid, I have read your name in a register. Your grandfather was a friend of the line. I owe you a courtesy, and I have given you the courtesy of speech. I would have been gone a quarter-hour past had I not waited." The giant's eyes filled. "Yea, waited," he said. "I waited. For me, for the line. The line tells me when a kinsman comes to a door. You came to the door, I waited." Hagrid said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Horse, tell the little his mum and dad, they were good people." "I will tell him." The Count turned. He went past the giant, past the smoking gate, into the lane. The lane became, 4 steps along, a road in another country, and then it was not a road at all, and then the Count was at the great doors of his own house, and Adrian was waiting. "He sleeps," the Count said. "He sleeps." Adrian agreed. He held out his arms. The Count gave him the child. Adrian held him with the carefulness of a man who had not held a small thing in 200 years. He looked at the face of the boy under the coat. He saw the scar. His mouth tightened. "It is a door," the Count said. "Closed for now. We will read it later." Yes, they went inside. In Surrey, on a paving stone outside a house numbered 4, an old man sat on a low wall under a street lamp that had been encouraged to flicker. He had brought lemon drops. He had brought a long speech. He had thought, in the slow part of his thinking, that he would have to deliver the speech to a woman with a thin neck and pinched lips, and he had been working on the wording. A tabby cat, on the wall beside him, became a woman in green tartan. "Albus," she said. "Minerva." He did not turn. "You are still waiting?" "I am." "It has been 3 hours." "It has. He should be here." The old man looked down the street. A cup of cocoa would have been very welcome. He did not say this. He said, "Minerva, I fear we have been outpaced." Outpaced by whom? He did not answer at once. He had felt, an hour and a half ago, the breaking of an old protection at Godric's Hollow, and a moment later the closing of another protection over it, and the second protection had not been his. He had thought, at first, that it was a Potter house spell, some lingering thing of Lily's. He no longer thought so. A small owl came down out of the dark. It landed on his knee. It had a folded parchment. The headmaster of Hogwarts took the parchment off the owl. He gave the owl a piece of biscuit from his pocket. The owl considered the biscuit and consented to it. The headmaster opened the parchment. It was a single line, in a hand he had seen once in his life, in a Bucharest archive 50 years before. "The boy is in my house. He is well. You will write to me at the usual address." The headmaster of Hogwarts, read it twice. He folded it. He put it in his sleeve. He sat very still for a long time. "Albus," said Minerva McGonagall. "Whose hand is that?" "Minerva," said the headmaster of Hogwarts, in a voice that no one at Hogwarts had ever heard. "The Wallachia line has reached down." "What does that mean?" "It means that Lily Potter was a granddaughter of the Moravis. It means I should have known. It means that there are old compacts that predate our statute by a clean 300 years, and that one of them has been invoked." He folded his hands. He looked, for the first that evening, like the age he was. "It means the boy is in Wallachia." "He cannot be in Wallachia." "He is in Wallachia." "Albus, Minerva, the boy is alive. The boy is safe. I would prefer that he were here. I cannot say that he is wrong to be there." He looked up at the street lamp. The street lamp flickered, obliging. "Send the Potter Cottage records to me, all of them, and, Minerva, be discreet. What will you tell the world? That the boy is in protection, that he will return when he is of age. And in the meantime—" The headmaster of Hogwarts breathed out, very slowly. He took a lemon drop from the bag in his pocket. He put it in his mouth. He did not enjoy it. "In the meantime," he said, "the world will say what it will say, and an old man will write a very polite letter." Across the country, in a sleeping bundle in a coach that did not need horses, a small boy in a coat that did not belong to him crossed an invisible border in the dark. He was, in the way of small sleeping children, unaware. He did not yet know that his life had moved east. He did not know that he was about to be taught, slowly and very well, every language he would need, and a number that he would not. He did not know that there was a brother already waiting to teach him a sword. He did know, with a small unconscious certainty in the part of him that mothers leave us with, that the arm that carried him meant him well. The Count, with the child against his chest, walked the last corridor to his library. The doors opened, the fire was lit. Adrian had set a low chair near the hearth and a basin of warm water beside it. "He will be hungry when he wakes," Adrian said. "He will." "What does the line wish?" the Count thought. He had thought on the way home of the things the line could wish: an heir for the castle, a tool for an old hand, a stone laid in a wall. He had set those thoughts aside one at a time. He set them aside again now. "The line wishes the child to be a child," he said. "Whatever else may come, the line will wait for it." Adrian nodded. He drew the coat back from the boy's face. He looked, with the careful eyes of a brother who had not had a brother, at the small slack mouth and the soft hair and the green-eyed lids closed. "He looks like her," he said. "He looks like the line. Both, then. Both." The boy stirred. He turned his face into the Count's neck. He made a small sound that was not a word and not a cry, only the soft groan of a child whose body had been working very hard for a number of hours. The Count placed his hand to the boy's back and held him steady and waited. The boy opened his eyes. He looked up at a face he had not seen in his life. He looked at a chin that was not his father's. He looked at a mouth that did not smile yet. He looked at eyes that were dark and steady. The boy did not cry. He looked at the eyes, and the eyes looked back, and after some long, unmeasured time the boy reached, with one small, slow hand, and laid his palm flat to the Count's cheek. The Count did not move. He held very still. He let the small hand stay. "Hello, little one," he said. The child looked at him. "My name is Vlad," the Count said. "You will say it in time." The child blinked. He did not say it. He had not, in his 16 months of life, said very many words yet. He had said mama, and he had said da for his father, he had said ball, and he had said no. With great certainty and at frequent intervals. He looked at the man holding him. He looked at the room behind the man. He was very tired. He said, with a small piece of breath he had been saving, "Tartar." The Count went still. Adrian, in the chair near the hearth, sat up straight. The child, having said the word, looked pleased with himself in the small, unfocused way of small children. He laid his head down against the Count's shoulder. He closed his eyes. The fire moved in the grate. The library breathed. A book on the third shelf, which had been waiting 400 years for a small reader, settled half an inch on its spine in anticipation. "Father," Adrian said very low. "I heard him. That is Wallachia for father. I heard him. He has not been taught it. He has not." Then the line knows what the line knows," said the Count. He looked down at the small head against his collarbone. The boy was asleep again. His mother's careful, terrible last working had laid him down and brought him here and let him say a word he should not have known. The Count stood with him. He walked slowly to the chair by the hearth. He sat. He shifted the boy in his arms so that the boy's weight was right. He covered him with the corner of the coat. "Adrian, yes, find Hector. Tell him there is a child in the house. Tell him to inform Isaac. Tell the forge that I do not wish to be disturbed before morning. Tell the kitchens that the small one will want bread soaked in warm milk when he wakes, and that there will be a number of mornings in our future when the kitchens will be required to remember this." "Yes, father." "And, Adrian." Adrian paused at the door. "You have a brother." Adrian did not say anything. He looked at the Count and the small bundle in the Count's arms, and his eyes were the eyes of his mother, and his mouth was the mouth of his mother. And after a moment he inclined his head, the small, precise old courtly inclination of a son of the house, and he went out. The Count sat alone with the child by the hearth. Outside the high arched window the snow continued. The castle, in its great careful patience, waited. "Welcome home, little one," he said, in the language the boy had used. The boy, asleep, did not answer. The boy did not need to. Hector came to the library door in shirt sleeves, with ink on his thumb and a pair of spectacles he had owned for 11 years and never bothered to repair. He stopped at the threshold. He looked at the chair and the fire and the small head against the Count's shoulder, and he did not come in. "Master, Hector," Adrian said. Adrian said correctly. He is a child of the line, he will live here, he will be taught here. You will treat him as you treat my son, with one small refinement, which is that he will not always know what to do with kindness, and you will offer it anyway. Hector inclined his head. He had been with the house long enough to know which words required no answer. His name, Harry, he is 16 months old, and the cut on his brow. A door, closed, we will read it tomorrow, perhaps the day after. Hector looked at the boy, he looked at the Count. You have not held a small one in some time, master. I have not. You hold him well. I held one before. The hands remember. Hector did not say anything to that. He had been a forgemaster for long enough to know that hands remembered, and he had been a man for long enough to know that some hands remembered more than others. He bowed, the small bow of the household, and he went away. The Count looked at the fire. The fire moved. He spoke to it the way he sometimes spoke to old things in his house. Not in words, in a long, settled attention. The fire, in its way, answered, a small lift of flame at the back log, a soft hiss in the corner where the wood was wettest. The Count, who had not been warmed to a fire in a number of decades, felt the warmth anyway, by way of the small body against his collar. The boy slept on. In the morning the kitchens did what they had been told. There was bread soaked in warm milk. There was a small chair with a folded blanket on the seat to lift a small body to the table. There was a wooden spoon that had belonged to Adrian when Adrian had been the size to use it, brought up out of a drawer it had lived in for 3 centuries by a woman in the kitchens who had remembered exactly which drawer. The boy sat in the chair. He looked at the bowl. He looked at the spoon. He looked at the man who had set him in the chair, who had taken off the coat and replaced it with a small wool wrap that fit him from neck to knee. He picked up the spoon. He used it the way one uses a spoon when one has been using a spoon for 4 months, with concentration and a great deal of misdirection. The bread reached his face. Some of it reached his mouth. Most of the milk made an honest attempt at his chin and fell short. He looked, when he had achieved a working rhythm, at the Count, and the Count, who had been standing with his hands clasped behind him in the careful attitude of a man watching a small skilled laborer at work, inclined his head a 1/4 inch. The boy laughed. The Count did not, in the strict sense, laugh. He smiled. The smile happened in the corners of his mouth, and once it had happened there, it did not unhappen. He had not, in the strict sense, smiled in a number of years. Adrian, in the doorway, leaned against the frame and watched. He kept his face composed. He did not interfere. He had at one time sat in that chair himself. He had at one time been the small, slow laborer with the spoon. He let his brother have the chair. "Brother," he said, when the boy had reached the bottom of the bowl, "you are well fed." The boy looked at him. The boy considered him. Adrian, in the morning light through the high window, had the gold of his mother in his hair and the calm of his father in his stance, and he was not what a 16-month-old child knew what to do with. The boy stared. The boy reached out one milk-wet hand. Adrian, with the composure of a 400-year-old man who had been waiting all night to be touched by a small grubby palm, crossed the room and took the offered hand in his own. He bent. He pressed his forehead to the small forehead. He said in Old Wallachia, a sentence the boy would not understand for years. He said, "I am your brother. I will not be a stranger to you. The years will not make me one." The boy looked at him with green, steady eyes. He said, "Freight." The Count, who had been standing very still, sat down at the end of the table. He did not say anything. He poured himself a cup of something dark. He drank. Adrian straightened. He let the small hand go gently. He looked at his father. He did not say what he was thinking, because he did not need to, because his father had heard. The line, this morning, was being generous with words. By the second night, the boy was sleeping in a room 2 doors down from the Count's. The room had been chosen on a measure of 3 rules. It had a window that did not face the moon at the wrong angle. It had a door that the Count's hand opened without lifting. And it had a hearth that had warmed Adrian when Adrian had been small. The kitchens had brought up a small bed. The forge had sent, by way of a respectful note from Varney, a small iron token to hang above the door. A coiled dragon in the old style, beaten thin and polished to a low gleam, the kind of working set above doors in Wallachia in the years before the soft West had decided dragons were a story. The Count, on the second night, opened the boy's door an hour after midnight. He went in quietly. He sat on the low chest at the foot of the small bed. He watched the boy sleep. The scar in candlelight was a thin red seam. It looked, to the eye that had not been trained, like a healed cut. It was not. The Count knew what it was. He had felt it from across the lane at Godric's Hollow. He had felt it more clearly in his own corridor. He felt it most clearly now, the way one feels a draft from a closed door. There was a thing in the boy's head. It was not a large thing. It had been broken and crammed and shoved into a place it was not designed for. It was wedged behind the closed door of the mother's working, like a small piece of grit behind a sealed eye. It could not get out. It could not, while the working held, do very much from where it was. It could listen on, and it could, at certain moves of the castle's deep magic, twitch. The Count studied it without engaging it. He did not approach the door. He did not knock. He was, in his great patience, content to know it was there. The door was a working of a mother's love, and it would hold for years. He would have years to think about what to do with what lay behind it. He bent. He laid the back of one cool hand to the boy's forehead, very lightly, so as not to wake him. The boy did not wake. The scar warmed under his touch, very slightly, in something that was not quite a flinch and not quite a welcome. "Sleep, little one," said the Count, in old Wallachian. "Whatever is behind your door, I am behind the door. I am behind every door in this house. You are at the center of the house. Nothing reaches the center without me." He sat with the boy for an hour. He did not move. He looked at the small hand curled near the small mouth, at the soft hair on the small head, at the line of the scar above the small closed eye. He listened to the small steady breathing. He thought, slowly, of a woman he had known long enough ago that the memory had become a stone he could carry without weight. He thought of a son who had not been born in this house, and a daughter who had not been born at all. He thought of a long room with a long table and a great deal of silence, and the way a man learns in time to keep silence company instead of fighting it. He did not, the Count, think the word for what he felt. He did not name it. The line did not name such things. The line, when it loved, simply began to love, and the loving did the rest. He stood. He covered the small body with the small blanket. He went out. In the corridor, Adrian was waiting, with the patient attitude of a son who had been told nothing and had assembled everything. "Father, he sleeps." "What is the working on him?" "A door, a small thing behind it. We will not open the door while the child is still small. And when the child is grown." The Count looked down the corridor, past the iron sconce that had been lit since 1412 and would be lit through the next 4 centuries, and he said, "When the child is grown, the child will open it himself, with us beside him." Adrian did not press further. They walked together. At the great window in the gallery, where the moon had cleared the snow and lay along the floor in long blocks of cold light, they paused. "Father." "Yes." "What shall we tell him, in time, of his parents?" "The truth." "Which truth?" "The whole of it, slowly, as he can carry it." The Count rested a hand on the windowsill. "He will hear, in time, the name of the thing that killed his mother. He will hear it from us. He will not hear it from a stranger." "And the line? Shall we tell him about the line, in time? He will learn Old Wallachian first. He will learn it the way children learn anything, by hearing it. He will learn Latin from the books. He will learn Old Slavic from the prayers. He will learn the sword from you. He will learn alchemy from Isaac when he is old enough not to set himself on fire. He will learn iron from Varney when he is old enough not to set the forge on fire. He will learn restraint from me, which will be the slowest of his lessons. And vengeance? He will not be taught vengeance. He will be taught mercy. He will, in time, be taught the difference. Vengeance is a small thing that wears a great coat. Mercy is a great thing that wears no coat at all. I would prefer my son to know which is which." Adrian did not speak for a moment. Then he said, "Your son?" "Yes, you said it without thinking." I said it with all my thinking, 8 hours of it. A walk in the snow, a reading of a working, a spoon at a table. The Count looked at his Dampier son with the long, steady look that Adrian had known since he could remember. He is my son, he is your brother. The line has reached down, we will not turn the line back. Adrian inclined his head. He said, Tartar, yes, you used to be called that by me. You may call me that again. Adrian looked away. He did not, in the sense of weeping, weep. He had not wept in a long time and would not now. He only looked at the moon on the stone floor and let the line of his mouth soften. The small softening that on Adrian's face was the equivalent of any other man's tears. They stood at the window. Behind them, 2 doors down, a small boy slept with his hand near his mouth, the way small boys sleep when they are kept safe. The castle, in its great careful patience, went on keeping him. Outside, the snow, having delivered the boy, went away to deliver other things. In the days that followed, the castle adjusted. The kitchens learned that the small one liked his bread with honey and not jam. The forge learned that the small one, if left alone, would walk down to the gallery and stand at the railing and watch the bellows for an hour at a time, with the focused attention of a small scholar of fire. Hector learned that the small one liked to be carried on his shoulder, and that, once on the shoulder, the small one would press his small hand into Hector's hair and not let go, and that Hector, gruff Hector with the ink on his thumb, would walk corridors he had no business walking in. Simply because the small fist was there, Isaac, who did not, in the strict sense like children, came to the library on the 4th evening and asked the Count what was expected of him. He will, in time, ask you about restraint, the Count said. You will answer him. I am the wrong teacher for restraint. You are exactly the right teacher. You know what unrestraint cost you. You will, in time, tell him about it, in the small, careful pieces he can carry, and he will understand what you mean before he understands the words. That is what you have to give him. Give it? Isaac was quiet a long time, then he said, Yes, master. He went away. He did not come back to the library for a week, and on the 8th evening, when he came, he brought with him a small book bound in dark leather. It was, he said, his own first book of small alchemies. He had used it when he was 11. He had kept it since. He set it on the low table by the boy's chair. He went away again. The book stayed on the low table for 9 years. The boy, when he was old enough to read it. The boy, when he was old enough to ask after it, was told whose book it had been and looked at the spine for a long moment, and then took the book to Isaac and asked him to explain a working he did not understand. Isaac, in his cold, quiet way, explained it. He had been waiting 9 years to explain it. He did not say this. The line did not name such things. On the 7th evening, the Count took Harry into the library, set him in the great chair, and laid a single book on his lap. It was a book of small Wallachia rhymes. It had pictures, in old ink, of small animals doing small, impossible things. A hedgehog conducting an orchestra of bats, a bear writing a letter to a mountain, a wolf carrying a candle. The boy looked at the pictures. He turned the pages with the careful seriousness of a child who has been given a thing of weight. The Count sat in the chair beside him. He read the first rhyme aloud. He read it slowly. The boy listened. He listened in the way of small children, with his whole face. The rhyme was about a small bear who had lost his shoe and who went to a mountain to ask for it back. And the mountain, after some thought, gave him not his shoe but a stone. And the small bear, after some thought, decided the stone would do. The boy laughed at the part where the bear decided the stone would do. The Count, in the careful corners of his mouth, smiled again. He turned the page. He read the next rhyme. By the end of the book, the boy had said 3 new Wallachia words. By the end of the week, he had said 30. By the end of the month, he was speaking in small 2-word sentences. By the end of the year, he was, in the small, competent fashion of a child kept warm and read to, fluent. The line, in its way, had been pulling. The teaching only ratified what the line had already done. The Count knew this. He did not say it. He kept reading. He read every evening. He read until the boy could read with him. He read until the boy could read without him. He read until the boy began to read to him. In 100 small reciprocal moments, in a chair by a hearth in a castle that had not been warmed to anything in a number of decades, a man and a boy who had been brought together by the breaking of a line settled, slowly, into being a line again. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2 Lessons in the Tower. By the time he was 6, Harry could read 3 languages and write 2. He could read Wallachia, which had been the first. He could read Latin, which had been the second. He could read English, which had been the third, and which, his father said, he would need to remember because there was a country in the West where it was spoken. And that country had not stopped being his country merely because he had ceased to live in it. He wrote Wallachia in a careful upright hand that Adrian had taught him. He wrote Latin in the looser hand that Isaac had taught him. He had not yet been taught to write English. That lesson, the Count said, would wait until the boy could write a letter to a man without giving anything away in it, which was an English skill of long standing. The library at dawn was the warmest room in the castle, not in temperature. Temperature was no concern of the library, which was always cool. In presence. There were books at the back of the lower shelves that had, in 2 centuries of being shelved, become accustomed to the boy's small steps. They leaned, in the moments before he came in, a 1/4 inch toward the aisle. The fire on the hearth, which the Count had ordered kept low at all hours, would lift its head a half-flame when the boy crossed the doorway. The chair in the southeast corner had been built for someone tall and had, over the past 4 years, learned to fold a cushion around a smaller body. Harry, on the morning he turned 6, came into the library before the household had finished its night. He had a candle in one hand and a wooden sword in the other. The wooden sword was Adrian's, a thin oaken blade with a leather grip, which Adrian had given him 3 years ago and which Adrian now allowed him to carry, but not yet to swing, at any distance Adrian was not also at. He went to the southeast chair. He set the candle on the small table. He sat. He laid the wooden sword across his knees in the careful manner of a boy who had been taught that a sword, even a wooden sword, was not a thing to be left on the floor. The book on the small table was a book Adrian had set there the previous evening. It was a book of small Latin epigrams. Harry opened it. He read for an hour. He read until the bell in the eastern tower, which marked the 2nd hour after dawn, struck. Then he closed the book. He stood. He carried the candle to the great hearth and snuffed it in the manner Hector had taught him, between his palms, not his breath. He took his wooden sword. He went out. In the long courtyard between the library and the south tower, Adrian was waiting. "You are late, brother." "I read another page." "You read another 2 pages." "I read 1.5. The bell struck on a paragraph you had not finished. It struck on a sentence I had not finished. That is half a paragraph." Adrian, who in the long courtyard at dawn was nothing more frightening than a tall, pale older brother in a dark coat, laughed. It was a small laugh, kept in the chest. He drew his own wooden sword from where it had been leaning against the south wall. "Today," he said, "we will speak about the second guard. We spoke about the second guard yesterday. We spoke about the second guard in theory yesterday. Today we will speak about it in practice. Stand here." Harry stood there. Adrian had been teaching him the sword for 2 years and would continue to teach him for 9 more. The lessons were unhurried. Adrian, who could have made a swordsman of any human in 18 months, did not see why a child should be made a swordsman in 18 months. The line had reached down for a child. The child would be allowed the slow geometry of a child's learning. Foot. Harry moved his foot. Not that foot. The other. Yes. Why must I move it before I lift the sword? Because the foot will not move while the sword is in the air. The foot moves first or the foot does not move. A man who lifts a sword before he has moved his foot has lost the duel he has not yet begun. Freight. Yes. How many duels have you fought? Adrian considered. He set his sword tip on the flagstone and rested his hand on the pommel. A great many. How many have you lost? 1. Truly, truly. A man in a tavern in Sevastopol in 1711. He had a long arm and a short conscience. He took my left thumb. I took his right ear. We agreed it was a draw. I have since then learned to call a draw a loss because it is more accurate. That is not a real loss. It is the only one I have for you. I have not been beaten outright since I was 13. Be glad I am teaching you, brother, and not the man who beat me when I was 13, who would have taught you in 18 months and made you very dangerous and not very kind. Harry considered this. He thought about it for a moment. Then he moved his foot. He had been at the castle for 4.5 years. He had been Harry of the castle for longer than he had been Harry of any other place. He did not, except in the very deep undertow of his sleep, remember the smell of a house in Godric's Hollow that had burned. He did, in the daylight, remember the green of a woman's eyes that had been his eyes. He had been told about her. He had been told the truth about her. He had been told, very carefully, the name of the man who had killed her, and what kind of man he had been, and where he was now, which was nowhere, which was also not quite nowhere, which was a complication his father had warned him would in time matter. He moved his foot. He lifted the sword. Adrian, with the patience of a man who had 400 years to spare and was choosing to spend them on a 6-year-old, corrected the angle of the wrist. By the end of the hour, the boy had learned the second guard well enough that Adrian permitted him to spar at it for 90 seconds. 90 seconds was a long time in Adrian's lessons. The boy ended the 90 seconds out of breath, with his hair stuck to his forehead, grinning the small, competent grin of a small, competent student. Adrian, who had ended the 90 seconds in exactly the position he had begun them in, inclined his head. You did not lose your foot. No, you did not lose your wrist. No, you lost your guard twice on the third stroke. Tomorrow we will speak about the third stroke. Freight. Yes. You said we would speak about the second guard today. We did. We have. We will speak about the third stroke tomorrow because the third stroke is what undoes the second guard. That is how I will teach you the second guard, by teaching you what undoes it. Harry, who had been 5 years old when he had begun to suspect that his older brother was the cleverest person in the castle, was now 6 and had stopped suspecting. Yes, Freight. They walked back to the Great Hall together. In the Great Hall there was breakfast, and at the breakfast there was a woman in robes the color of dust who had not been at the castle the day before. Harry stopped at the doorway. He looked at the woman. He looked at his father, who was already seated. He looked at Adrian. This is Cipher Belnades, the Count said. She is a speaker. She has agreed to take a year of her wandering and to spend it at the castle. She will teach you healing magic. You will sit beside her at table. You will rise when she rises. You will, in short, do as you would do for any guest of the line. Harry crossed the hall. He stopped at the right of Cipher Belnades' chair. He inclined his head, the small inclination Adrian had taught him in his first year. Mistress Belnades, I welcome you to the castle. The line welcomes you. She looked up at him. She was younger than his father, by some incomprehensible amount, and older than Adrian in a way that did not have to do with years. Her hair was the color of wheat in the second week of harvest. Her eyes were speaker eyes, blue and warm and bottomless. Master Harry, she said. I welcome the welcome. May I tell you something before we are friends? You may. I helped in my younger years to kill a Dracula. The hall went quiet. The cutlery did not stop, because cutlery in the castle was not so easily startled, but the people who were not the Count and the speaker stopped breathing in the way one stops to listen. Harry considered this. He considered Cipher Belnades' blue speaker eyes. He considered, with the small, composed competence of a 6-year-old who had been taught to consider, the situation he was in. Was it a good killing? He asked. She looked at him for a moment. The corner of her mouth, which had been steady, did a small thing. It was a kind killing, Master Harry. Of a man who had asked, with the whole of his grieving heart, to be killed. Harry nodded. He pulled out the chair beside her. He sat. Then we may be friends, he said. Will you pass the bread? She passed him the bread. The Count, at the head of the table, did not move his face by any visible measure, but Hector at the sideboard, who knew the Count's face the way a smith knows iron, noted the very small softening of the line of his mouth. Hector poured wine that nobody had asked for. Adrian, in the chair across from his brother, said only, "He will be insufferable about that for a week." "He will be insufferable about it for 9 years," said the Count, "and we will let him." The boy, in the way of small children, did not understand that he was being praised, and so did not become insufferable. He buttered his bread. He ate it. He listened to Cypher Belnades describe, in a voice that was both scholarly and kind, the workings of small healing spells. He was, by the end of breakfast, in love, not, in the strict sense, with Cypher Belnades, with the idea that there were workings in the world that one used not to kill, but to keep alive. By the end of the year, when Cypher Belnades' wandering had asked her back, Harry could close a clean cut, set a small bone with a small steady working, and cool a fever. He could not yet, she said, save a life. Saving a life required years more learning and a great deal of grief to draw on, and she did not, she said, wish him grief. He would learn the rest, she said, when he was older and had earned the grief. He kissed her hand at her leaving. She kissed his forehead. She said something to the Count in Old Slavic that Harry understood half of. She rode away on a fast horse with 2 of her cousins and a Belmont, and the castle, which had not had a speaker in it in 80 years, kept her cup on the sideboard for the rest of the year. The Belmont she had ridden away with had been Trevor. Trevor Belmont had come to the castle 3 weeks after Cypher. He had stayed for a fortnight. He had said almost nothing at table. He had asked the Count, on the 3rd night, with the directness of a man who had been raised by men who did not bother with politeness, whether the Count would permit him to teach the boy the whip. The Count had said, if he wishes it. The boy had wished it. Trevor Belmont had handed him the whip on the 4th morning. It was not the family whip. It was a smaller whip, a whip a Belmont gave to a child for whom a Belmont had taken a liking. It had a wooden handle worn smooth and a long braided thong that knew its own weight. Harry, sir, your brother has taught you the sword. Some of the sword. Yes, sir. Good, the whip is not a sword. Do not try to make it a sword. The whip is a thrown thing. You throw it. It comes back. You do not catch it. You let it come. Yes, sir. There is a thing about a Belmont whip you should know before I let you swing one. It does not bite a friend. The grip remembers. If you swing it, and you have not meant it, the strike will not land. The whip knows the swing of a man who means a death from the swing of a man who is only making a noise. Do not test this. Some whips have got it wrong. Yes, sir. Do not throw it at your brother. No, sir. Do not throw it at your father. No, sir. Do not throw it at the woman in robes. No, sir. Do not throw it at me. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you will, or yes, sir, you will not, Harry considered. He considered, with the small, composed competence of a boy who at 6½ had begun to enjoy being asked precise questions. Yes, sir, I will not. Good lad. Trevor Belmont put a hand on Harry's shoulder. The hand was the size of a small ham. Now, stand here, take this. Throw it the way I show you. We will be at this until the bell strikes, and at the bell I will buy you a cup of cocoa from the kitchens, which I have been informed will be made if I ask in the appropriate tone, which I have been informed I do not know. You ask, Hector. With both hands flat on the table. Both hands flat on the table. It is the gesture for a request that is owed. You are 6½ years old. Yes, sir. You are a strange lad, Harry. Yes, sir. Trevor Belmont laughed. It was a real laugh, the laugh of a man who had not laughed easily for a long time, and the courtyard outside the South Tower, which had not heard the laugh of a Belmont in 100 years, gave it back to him for a moment in the stone, before letting it go to wherever Belmont laughs go. By the end of the fortnight, Harry could throw the whip at a thrown apple 12 feet out, and catch the apple along its equator with the snap, splitting it cleanly into halves that fell either side of the line of the throw. Trevor Belmont, who had been quietly drinking small beer all afternoon, set down the cup and said, Well, sir, keep the whip. Sir, keep it. I have no son to give it to, and I have a niece who would not thank me for it. Keep it. Take care of it, oil it once a month. Don't throw it at your father. No, sir. If you ever need to find me, send a letter to the Belmont Keep. It is mostly fallen down and a draft will reach the bedroom anyway. I will answer. He swung up onto his horse. He rode out at the head of two of Cypher's cousins. He did not turn to wave. He was not, Adrian later told Harry, a man who waved. He was, Adrian said, a man who simply went and trusted that the going was understood. Isaac took up the next teaching. Isaac was not, by inclination, a teacher. He was a man who, having survived a number of seasons he had not deserved to survive, had decided that other people's pain was a thing he had no further taste for. He was civil at table. He was silent in the corridors. He had, the Count had said, a great deal to give the boy, if the boy could find the way of asking. Harry, who at 7 was tall enough to reach the lower shelves of Isaac's small library, found the way of asking. He went, one evening in the second week of his 7th year, to the door of Isaac's quarters. He stood at the door. He did not knock. Adrian had taught him that some doors were knocked at and some were waited at, and Isaac's was a waiting door. Isaac, on the inside, came to the door after 8 minutes. He opened it. He looked at the boy. He did not speak. Master Isaac, I have a question. May I come in? You may. Harry came in. He sat on the small stool by the cold hearth. Isaac sat in the chair. They sat for 2 minutes in silence, which was Isaac's measure of a guest. At the end of 2 minutes, Isaac inclined his head a quarter inch, which was the measure of guest who had earned a question. Master Isaac, what is restraint? Isaac, who had been expecting a question about a working, or a question about a verse, or a question of the kind a small boy might bring to a man with a great library, did not answer at once. He looked at Harry. He looked at the cold hearth. Why do you ask? Tartar says that I will learn restraint from him and that it will be the slowest of my lessons. Adrian says that restraint is what makes a sword and not a wound. Cypher said that healing is restraint that has been turned around. Trevor says of restraint that he does not have any and is not the one to ask. And so you come to me. Tartar said you were the right teacher. He did not say why. He said you would tell me. Isaac was silent another long while. Harry, who at 7 had become accustomed to long silences, did not press. He sat on the stool. He watched the cold hearth. He thought, in the way of small, thoughtful children, about a number of small, thoughtful things. At last, Isaac said, Restraint is what one does with a strength one has and does not use. It is not the absence of the strength. It is the strength, kept ready, kept warm, kept in the hand and not used. A man without strength is not restrained. A man without strength is only weak. Restraint requires the strength first. Then the choice. What if the strength wants out? Then the restraint must be greater than the wanting. Each day greater, each year greater. There is no end to the wanting. There is no end to the restraint either. They feed each other in a man who is doing it well. Tartar is doing it well. Your father has done it well for longer than this castle has stood. Yes. Have you done it well? The question, from a 7-year-old, in any other house would have been forgiven for impertinence. In Isaac's small cold room, in front of Isaac's cold hearth, it was not impertinence, it was a question, and Isaac, who was a man who answered questions, answered it. I have not always. I have at certain seasons undone with my anger more than I had built with my hands. I have since then learned what I should have learned long before. I am still learning. I will be learning when you are an old man and I am still here, and you will know me then as a man who has at last learned, or you will know me then as a man who is still trying. Either is honest. Harry considered. He considered for some time, then he said, Master Isaac, may I come back tomorrow? You may. The door is a waiting door. You know how to wait at it. I do. He came back. He came back the next evening, and the evening after that, and the evening after that. By his 8th year, he had been admitted to Isaac's working chamber. By his 9th year, he had been taught the first 3 small alchemies. By his 10th year, he had been told the names of 3 of Isaac's failed workings, and what had failed in them, and what Isaac had done afterward to set them right. The boy, in his way, learned restraint, not as a discipline alone, as a friendship. Hector taught him iron in a different fashion. Hector did not believe in long silences. Hector believed in a great many words and the warm tobacco smell of the small forge in the eastern wall. He stood the boy at the bellows. He stood the boy at the anvil. He gave him a hammer that had been beaten down in size from a hammer Varney had made for an apprentice 3 centuries ago, and which fitted Harry's hand the day Hector gave it to him, because Varney had measured the boy in passing and forged the hammer in a night, and not mentioned it. "You are the small hammer," Hector said, "because you are a small hammerer. The hammer will grow as you grow. By the time you are 17, the hammer will be Varney's hammer for a grown man, and you will have grown into the size of it, and we will all pretend that no one ever measured anything." "Yes, sir. What I will teach you is not the making of swords. Swords are Varney's craft. I will teach you the calling of small useful things. I will teach you to call a horseshoe to a foot it has come off of. I will teach you to call a nail to a board it should be in. I will teach you to call a fire to a hearth that has gone cold. These are the small kindnesses of iron. The line should know them. The line does not know enough small kindnesses. Yes, sir. There are larger callings. We will not speak of them yet. I called too large a calling once. I will not call so large a calling again. You will in time know what I called. You will in time know what it cost. You will not in time do it. We are agreed. We are agreed." Hector laughed his great loud laugh. He clapped the boy on the shoulder. He gave him the small hammer. Varney, the forgemaster, did not teach the boy at all in those years. He watched. He came to the forge in the mornings before Hector came down. He found on the anvil a small horseshoe the boy had made the day before, and he looked at it, and he did not move it. He left in its place a small folded scrap of paper with a small drawn correction, an angle adjusted, a curve eased. The boy, in the mornings before Adrian's lessons, came to the forge and found the paper and saw the correction and tried again. By the boy's 10th year, there were no more papers. Varney had begun to leave, instead, very small finished objects of his own. A key for a door the boy did not yet know about, a clasp for a coat the boy did not yet have, an oil flask the size of a thumb. Varney did not speak. He worked. He left objects. The boy, in his way, was being made by the entire castle, and Varney was making the very small, precise things one cannot make by being taught. In the center of all these teachings sat the Count. He taught the boy, on the surface, the things one expected a Wallachian lord to teach an heir. The names of the great families and which had betrayed which, the names of the great houses and which had stood and which had not. The names of the 7 workings that protected the castle and which of those workings could be deepened and which could not. These were daily lessons in the library with maps. Underneath the daily lessons, the Count taught mercy. He did not name it as a lesson. He never said, "This is your lesson in mercy today." He said, instead, "There is a woman in the southern village who has lost her son. Go to her, sit with her, do not speak. Stay until she stops weeping or until she begins to weep harder. If she stops, leave a small loaf from the kitchens on the table. If she weeps harder, stay another hour. Come back tomorrow. Do not, in this matter, do anything more than this. We are agreed, Harry said. He went. He sat. The woman in the southern village wept for 3 hours that first day. He stayed. He left a loaf on the table when she had stopped, and he came back the next day and he sat. And on the next day she had stopped weeping in the way one stops carrying a thing one has been carrying for a long time, and she made him tea. He drank the tea. He sat for another hour. He went home. He learned, by the time he was 9, that mercy was, in the Count's hands, a craft. There were small mercies and large mercies. There were mercies that were silences and mercies that were words. There were mercies that were givings and mercies that were withholdings. A mercy that arrived too soon was an insult. A mercy that arrived too late was a wound. The boy learned to read the moment. He learned to read the room. He learned, in the long, slow, patient method of his father, to be a man who could enter a room and lower the temperature of grief by half a degree merely by sitting in it correctly. He did not become a saint. He became a son of the line. The line, in its way, was a long discipline of mercies. The line had not always been so. The line in earlier centuries had not always been so. The line, since his father had come into it, had been climbing slowly into mercy, generation by generation, ledger entry by ledger entry. The boy, in his small way, was the next entry in the ledger. On his 9th birthday, the Count gave him the locket. It was a small locket, gold, with a small enamel painting of a bird on the front and a hinge that worked smoothly because Varney had 3 days before opened it and oiled it without saying so. The Count brought it into the library on a tray. He set the tray on the small table. He sat across from the boy. This was your mother's. Harry, on his 9th birthday in the southeast chair, looked at the locket. Tartar, yes, you said you would tell me about her in pieces. I did. Is this a piece? It is the piece I have been keeping for your 9th year. Open it. Harry opened the locket. Inside was a small lock of red hair, kept with a small drop of resin to hold it whole, and a piece of paper folded so small that it almost did not look like a piece of paper. He took the paper out. He unfolded it. He read it, it said, in a hand he had not seen and which his bones knew the way bones know an air. If you are reading this, my small one, I am dead and you are still alive. Be alive. Be good. Be kind. Find a person and let them love you. Let them. Lily. Harry sat for a long time with the paper open in his hand. He did not speak. The Count across from him did not speak. The hearth, in its way, did its small private kindness with the flame. After a long time, Harry folded the paper. He put it back in the locket. He closed the locket. He fastened the locket around his neck with the small Varney chain that had been on it, which fit, the way Varney's small things always fit. Tartar. Yes, she told me to let someone love me. She did. I have been letting you, for some years. You have. Is that what she meant? It is what she meant, and it is more than she meant. She meant any number of people in any number of years. She meant a wife in time if you should wish one. She meant a friend. She meant a brother, which you have. She meant a father, which you also have. She meant the company of the living, which she did not get to give you herself, and which she trusted in writing this that you would find. Read it once a year on this day. It is the kind of letter that grows. Yes, Tartar. And, Harry? Yes, Tartar. There is a thing in the world that killed your mother. You know this. You will in time meet it again. I will in time meet it with you. We have spoken of vengeance, you and I. We have spoken of restraint. We have spoken of mercy. When the time comes, you will know which of these to use, and you will use it, and I will be at your shoulder. We are agreed. We are agreed. The Count rose. He came around the small table. He set his hand for a long moment on the boy's head. The hand was cool and steady. The boy closed his eyes. The boy did not weep, because the line did not weep where a weeping had not been earned. But the boy, with his eyes closed, let himself be held by a hand for the small, extended, unmeasured time of being held. When he opened his eyes, the Count had stepped back. The hearth had risen a small flame. The locket was warm at his throat from the heat of his hand. He set his hand over it. Tartar, yes, I shall wear it always. Yes. And when she said, be kind, I shall be kind. Yes. Even to the thing in the world that killed her. The Count looked at his son for a long time. Then he said, if you can, you will not have to alone. We will choose together. There is a kindness that is mercy and a kindness that is not, and they are not always easy to tell apart in the moment. You will, when the time comes, have me at your shoulder and your brother at your other shoulder and a number of other shoulders behind you that you have not yet met. You will not have to choose alone. Tartar, yes. Thank you. The Count did not answer. He did not need to. He inclined his head, the small Wallachian inclination, the one that meant a great deal of things and which the boy at 9 had begun to read fluently. The library breathed. The locket warmed against his throat. The line, in its great careful patience, continued. Outside, in the courtyard of the South Tower, Adrian was waiting for the 3rd stroke lesson. Adrian had been waiting for 2 years for the third stroke lesson. The line did not hurry, and Adrian, who was of the line, did not hurry either. He stood, with his wooden sword tip resting on the flagstone, and watched the high library window for the boy's small head to appear. When the head appeared, he raised the wooden sword in salute. The head, after a moment, raised a small hand. The line, in its way between brothers, did its small daily ratification. The boy came down. The lesson began. By the end of the morning, he had been undone 3 times and had undone Adrian once, and Adrian had inclined his head, which was the dampier form of high praise, and the boy had wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and they had walked back to the great hall together. Inside the locket, in the small, careful resin, a piece of his mother's hair stayed safe. In the small, careful folded paper, his mother's last instructions stayed legible. In the boy, in his 9th year, both things began the slow, long work of becoming part of him. By his 11th year, the boy would be a Wallachian heir in everything but the saying. He would speak Wallachian, Latin, Old Slavic, English, and a serviceable Hungarian. He would sword at a level Adrian no longer needed to handicap. He would whip at a level Trevor had stopped commenting on. He would know healing well enough that Cypher, in her wandering, sent him scrolls. He would know iron from Hector and restraint from Isaac and 100 small precise objects from Varney. He would know mercy from his father. The line, in its slow, careful method, had made him. The line, in its slow, careful method, was not yet finished. There was, in the soft west, an owl with a letter on its leg. The owl was, in some month of the boy's 11th year, going to take wing. The line did not know yet which month. The line did not, in the way of lines, hurry. Chapter 2 End Chapter 3. The owl from Hogwarts. The owl came at the end of July. It was a tawny owl, of a kind not native to the Carpathians, and it had had a difficult flight. It arrived at the great gate of the castle at the 2nd hour after dawn, in a wind out of the west, and it landed, dignity intact, on the high iron crossbar above the gate. It folded its wings. It waited, a castle of the line knew owls. A boy of the line, hearing the small particular thump of an owl that had not perched here before, came up out of the courtyard at a run. Tartar, he did not, in the corridors, run. He was 11 years old that month and had been Wallachian-mannered for 9 of those years. He did, on this morning, run, because an owl unfamiliar at the great gate was an owl with a letter, and a letter at this address was always a letter that mattered. The Count was in the gallery, in the long brown coat he wore on summer mornings. Tartar, there is an owl. I heard it land. It is foreign. It is English. How do you know? By the wing beat. English owls fly with a small extra beat at the end of the stroke. They are confident birds and inefficient flyers. Harry laughed. It was a small laugh in the long line of laughs his father had patiently caused. They went down together. The owl on the great iron crossbar dropped to the Count's outstretched arm as though it had been doing so for a century. The letter was on heavy parchment, sealed in red, with a crest the Count did not need to look at to recognize. Hogwarts? Yes, for me. Of course for you. The age is right. The school has always taken the age. Harry, in the small reverence of a boy who had heard the word Hogwarts at his father's table since he was 4, took the letter. He looked at the crest. He turned the letter in his hands. He looked at his father. Will I go? That is a discussion for the library. The owl is for accepting or declining. The letter is for reading. The decision is older than the letter, and we have been making the decision quietly for 9 years. Have we? Yes. And you will go, Harry, because you have asked at the age of 7, at the age of 8, at the age of 9, and at the age of 10 to be permitted to go, and I have, on each of those askings, given the same answer, which is, in time. The time has come. Read the letter. Harry, read the letter. Dear Mr. Potter, it began, which was the first thing in the letter to give him pause, because he was not called Potter in his own house, and had not been for a long time. He read it through. He read the list. He read the postscript, which was a polite request that he reply by owl with all convenient speed, and which was signed Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress, in a hand he did not yet know. He folded the letter. He looked at his father. "They have called me Potter. That is the name the Western Ministry has you under. The line cannot change a record kept in a soft Western country without permission of a soft Western country, and the soft Western country has not, in 11 years, asked our permission for anything. We will, on certain documents, write Potter. On the inside of you, you will not write Potter, you will write what you write. We have spoken of this. Yes, Tartar, they will in time ask you about it. What shall I say? You shall say the truth. You are a Potter by your father who died. You are a son of the line of Dracula by adoption, which is older than your Western surname and which holds in 7 jurisdictions. You will, when asked, give them both names. You will, when not asked, give them whichever name the context asks for. We are agreed. We are agreed. They will send a representative, probably the woman who signed the letter. She will come to the gate. You will receive her. We will receive her. Adrian will receive her. We will be courteous, and we will be cool, and we will, by the end of the meeting, have agreed a number of things she does not realize we are agreeing. Yes, Tartar. He wrote the reply in his careful hand. He wrote it in English, which his father had at last permitted 2 years ago, after a winter of writing very precise small notes that gave nothing away. He sent the owl. The owl, having flown from the soft west, rested 2 days in the eastern mews and then went home with the reply tied at the leg. 3 days later, Minerva McGonagall arrived at the great gate. She had ridden in a coach the ministry had arranged with some difficulty, because the ministry did not, in its arrangements, ordinarily account for Wallachia. She got out of the coach in a tartan cloak with a brooch the color of heather. She looked up at the great gate. She did not, by any visible measure, swallow. The gate opened. Harry, in the courtyard, stood at the foot of the great steps. He was in a dark green coat that came to his knee, in trousers that had been cut for him by a tailor in Bucharest, in boots that had been polished that morning by the small, careful hands of a boy who had been taught that one's own boots were one's own work. He inclined his head. The inclination was the inclination Adrian had taught him for a guest of standing. Professor McGonagall, I welcome you to the castle. The line welcomes you. Minerva McGonagall, who had taught children for 40 years and had seen most kinds of small, composed person, looked at the small, composed person in front of her and did not, for a moment, speak. Mr. Potter. Mr. Dracula in this house, if you will permit, or Harry, either is in order. Harry then. She gathered herself. She extended a hand. He took it, in the small, precise grip Adrian had taught him for a guest who offered the hand, which was a less common gesture in Wallachia than in England, but which the line did not refuse when offered. I am very pleased to meet you. And I you, Professor. My father is in the library. He has asked that I bring you. The corridors are long. May I offer you my arm? She did not, in the strict sense, need an arm. He was an 11-year-old boy, and she was a witch of long experience. The offer, in any case, was a courtesy of the Wallachian kind, and she had read enough Romanian history to know the right answer. Thank you, Harry. He gave her his arm. They walked. He spoke, as they walked, about the courtyard, the gallery, the great window in the southern wall. The small drinking fountain Varney had set into the wall in 1584 because his master had once been thirsty after a long ride. He spoke politely. He did not speak too much. He did not, anywhere along the corridor, speak about his school. In the library the Count rose to receive her. Adrian, beside the long table, inclined his head. Hector, in shirt-sleeves at the sideboard, poured tea. Professor McGonagall, master. She did not, in the strict sense, know what to call him. The line did not have a title that translated. The line did not need one. Master will do if you will, or Vlad if it does not unsettle you. Master, then. Sit, please. The chair on the left is the warm chair. The chair on the right is the dignified chair. Take the warm chair. The corridors are cold and the day is colder than the corridors. She took the warm chair. The chair, in the castle's quiet way, fitted itself to her. She accepted a cup of tea from Hector, who had not asked, and who was not in the habit of asking. The tea was bergamot and very hot. The Count sat in the dignified chair, which was the chair on the right, because that was where the line's master had sat for 4 centuries. Adrian sat at the long table with a book open in front of him that he was not reading. Harry, with the precise instinct of a boy who had been raised in this room, sat on the small chair at the southeast corner. "You have come a long way, Professor," the Count said. "I have." "You will, I trust, be permitted to stay the night." "That is kind. It is sense. The flue from this house does not connect to your ministry by old preference. The portkey is troublesome at this hour and would land you in a marsh outside pest. The night is here. Stay. Thank you." "You have come, I believe, on 2 matters?" "Yes. The first is the letter. The boy has accepted. He will attend. That is gratifying to hear. The second is the meeting itself. You wish to see him. You wish to see us. You wish to take back to your headmaster a report that will reassure him on a number of points he has been worrying for 11 years. You are direct, Master. The line does not make a person travel 1,000 miles for indirection. Ask, I will answer, he will answer. We will, between us, answer enough to permit the boy to take a train at King's Cross on the 1st of September without your headmaster losing further sleep. She looked at him over the cup. She set the cup down. Has the boy been kept safe? He has. Has the boy been kept happy? The Count looked at Harry. He inclined his head a 1/4 inch. Harry, in the southeast chair, looked at the professor. He smiled the small, competent smile he had practiced on cipher bellnades on a morning in his 6th year. I have, Professor. Has the boy been told? About his mother and father? I have, Professor. My father told me the truth at the proper times. I have read the letter she left me. I have a piece of her hair. I keep it in this locket. He drew the locket out from his shirt. He did not open it. He showed it. He put it back. Has the boy been raised? Magically, the Count finished gently. He has. He has been raised, in addition, with a number of languages, a serviceable hand at the sword, a Belmont whip, the small alchemies, the small ironworkings, and an understanding of healing magic he received from a speaker who has since written to him 3 times a year. He is, on the magical question, more prepared than your school is ordinarily prepared to find an 11-year-old. You will not need to spend on him the 1st year of charms. You may wish to spend on him the 1st year of defense at the 2nd year level. We can write to your colleague Phileas about this. I have known him by correspondence since he was a young man. She was, by this point, having a great deal of difficulty drinking her tea. She set it down. Has the boy been? The boy has. There is. The scar. There is, said the Count. There is a thing behind the scar. We have known about the thing for 11 years. We have, in our patience, allowed it to remain there because we judged the working of his mother's that holds the door closed to be a kinder working than any of the alternatives we considered. Your headmaster, when you tell him, will be relieved on this point. Tell him we have not been hasty. Tell him we have, for 11 years, been very careful. I shall. The boy will, when he is older, open the door himself with us beside him. The thing behind the door will not be permitted to make a return on its own terms. It will be removed on ours. We are calm about this. I am told that you are calm about most things, Master. I am told the same, Professor. We must take our characters from those who report them, must we not? She looked at Adrian. Adrian, at the long table, looked back. Mr. Dracula, she said. Madam, you are the boy's brother. I am his brother. He has called me Freight since he was 16 months old. He has been my brother since the 2nd night of his life in this house. And you are. I am a Dampier. I am 410 years old. I am, on the question of whether I will permit harm to come to my brother, the kind of person who is not customarily reasoned with. Yes, she said, I see that. I will say this as plainly as I am able, madam. He goes to your school because we wish him to live for a year among children of his age, who are not 400 years old and who do not call him Freight. He will, at school, make friends. He will, at school, fall in love 3 or 4 times in the wrong directions. He will, at school, get himself into trouble that is not the trouble we would have built for him here, and the unfamiliarity of that trouble will, in the long run, be useful to him. We are not sending him to your school to learn magic. He has been learning magic for 9 years. We are sending him to your school to learn his peers. Treat him as a child. Do not treat him as a prince. He is not a prince. He is a boy. We will be grateful to your school for treating him as a boy." She nodded slowly. "And the trouble?" "Trouble will find him," said the Count. "Your school is famously sympathetic to trouble. The thing behind the scar is, I will warn you, going to attempt to return in some fashion in his school years. It is the only address it has. We will be ready. We will be close. The boy carries certain objects that will reach us at any hour. We will not be ungenerous with your school's faculty, but we will not consult them on the timing of our arrivals." "Master?" "Yes. What will you do when you arrive?" "I will, in the first instance, ask politely. In the second instance, I will speak more clearly. In the third instance, I will act. The first and second instances will be lengthy enough that any reasonable observer will think the line slow. They will not think the line slow when the third instance occurs. We are agreed. We are agreed," said the professor, who in 40 years had not had to say it back, and who said it now with the small, sober dignity of a teacher who had recognized a school that was older than hers. Harry, in the southeast chair, did not move. He had been listening. He had been, in his careful way, taking notes inside his head. When the tea had been finished, and the professor had been given a room and a hot meal and a hearth that knew her, the Count gathered Harry in the library and said, "Tomorrow you and I will go to London. You will need things from your school list. You will need to be seen in Diagon Alley as a small Wallachian heir who is, by coincidence, also the boy with the scar. The seeing of you in 2 of those capacities at once is a matter of long-term importance. We will be brief, and we will be polite. We will not on this trip make a scene. Scenes will come later. They are not for today." "Yes, Tartar." They went the next morning. Diagon Alley, on the day they came, did not know what to do with them. The Count walked at the head of his small party. Adrian walked at his right hand, in the long dark coat he wore in cities. Hector walked at his left hand, in the slightly less long dark coat that suggested, to anyone with eyes, that he was the kind of man who could undo a problem with the inside of his elbow. Harry walked between them, in his dark green coat, with his locket under his shirt and his wand money in a small pouch at his belt. They went to Gringotts first. The goblins, who had records the line had not updated in 80 years, brought up 2 ledgers. The first ledger was the Potter ledger, which had been kept dormant for 11 years. The second ledger was the Moravis ledger, which had not been opened in 7 generations. The Count produced a small key that no English goblin had seen, and a small phrase in Old Slavic that no English goblin had been taught. The goblin behind the counter, who was old enough to remember the phrase from his grandfather's tales, bowed an unhurried, respectful bow. "Master, Master Goblin. We open the Moravis account today. We do not, in this visit, draw on it. We open it as a courtesy to the institution and to put on record that the line is present and active. We will, in the boys' school years, transact through the Potter account. We will, in his adult years, choose. As master pleases." There was paperwork. There were signatures. There was a small ceremony, brief and dignified, in which Harry was permitted to set his small hand on the open ledger of his mother's line and to leave, in Old Slavic, the words his father had taught him for opening. The goblins, in their grave, courteous way, treated the boy as a person whose age was incidental to his standing. They came out of Gringotts into the alley. Diagon Alley turned. It was not, in any visible sense, a turning. The crowd did not stop. The shop bells did not still. The witches and wizards on the cobblestones did not, on the surface, do anything at all. What happened was beneath the surface, in the way air moves before a weather. The alley registered in its bones that a thing had walked out of the bank that did not ordinarily walk in the alley, and the alley, without knowing why, made a small space. "They are looking at us, Tartar. They are. Pay them no mind, walk." They walked. They went to Madame Malkin's first, because robes for school had to be measured and the line did not improvise on the question of clothes. In Madame Malkin's, on the stool, was a small pale boy of Harry's age, with sleek blonde hair and a chin that had been trained to come up before it had been asked to. He was looking out of the window in the bored attitude of a child who had been waiting a great deal that morning. He turned when the new customers came in. He saw the Count first, in the long coat. He saw Adrian, who was tall and pale and polite in a way that did not quite reach the eyes. He saw Hector, who was not pale, which was a relief, and who was looking at the window mannequin with the small, amused attention of a man for whom mannequins were a known curiosity. Then he saw Harry. "Hogwarts," he said. Harry, who had been told a number of things about a number of English wizarding families, recognized the cut of the boy's coat, and the cut of the boy's chin, and the small pale color of the boy's eyes, and assembled, with the quiet competence of a small Wallachia heir, the family name. "Yes." He said, "Hogwarts, you are Mr. Malfoy." The boy on the stool, who had not been expecting to be recognized, sat up a quarter-inch. "I am, Harry," Harry said, inclining his head. "Of the line of Dracula, in the Western Register, the family Potter. I have heard of your house." The boy on the stool considered him. The boy on the stool, who had been raised to be a small, unpleasant child at the encountering of strangers, did not quite know what to do with a small, composed Wallachia heir who had inclined his head to him in correct courtesy. The boy on the stool inclined his own head, the small inclination he had been taught for guests at the manor. "Malfoy," he said. "Draco Malfoy, I have not heard. The line of Dracula, you said?" "I did. My father has correspondence in Wallachia. It is possible they have written to my father." "You are." "I am the elder son's only younger. There is, in our house, my brother, and there is me. We are the line for the moment." Madame Malkin, who had been about to do the customary thing of telling the small Wallachia-spoken boy to step onto the second stool, found herself instead nodding politely and pulling out her tape. She set it to work. She did not make small talk. The line, when it stood for measuring, did not make small talk. The two boys on the two stools looked at each other with the careful look of small persons who had recognized, in each other, a category of upbringing they were familiar with. "Are you in Slytherin, then?" Draco said, after a moment. "I do not yet know. The hat decides, I am told. I have read about the hat. I have in my house been raised with certain habits that the hat will, I am told, take into account. I should not be surprised if I went there. I should not be surprised if I went elsewhere. The line does not prefer one house. The line prefers that I make friends. It was the word my father used. My father has views on certain houses. Most fathers do. My father has views as well. He has, on this matter, not given them to me. He is, on this matter, letting me find my own. We may be friends, Mr. Malfoy, or we may not. We may sit at the same table, or we may not. We may find by Christmas that we like one another or do not. We are very young. There is no need to choose today." Draco Malfoy, who in his 11 years had not been spoken to like this by another 11-year-old, did a small, unfamiliar thing with his face. It was, in a small way, a smile. That is sensible. I try to be. You speak Wallachia, yes, also Latin, also Old Slavic. Also English, as you hear. I have a serviceable Hungarian and a poor French. My father has been preparing me to be useful in a number of countries, in the small possibility that I shall in time visit any of them. You have been preparing for school for a long time, then. I have been preparing for the world, of which school is a part. The line on the two stools did its small private alliance. They were not on the stools friends. They were not on the stools enemies. They were on the stools an arrangement. Two small heirs who had recognized in each other a manner that was not common in the alley, and who had agreed, without saying so, to extend each other the small respect of recognition. The line would, in years to come, build on this. it would build slowly. The line did most things slowly. Madame Malkin pinned the last hem. She told them they were finished. She accepted the Count's payment with the small flutter of a woman who had not been paid in old coin in some time. The Count thanked her in his long, careful way. They went out. They went to Ollivander's next. Mr. Ollivander, in his shop, was at the counter when they came in. He looked up. He saw the Count. He did not, by any visible measure, swallow. He had heard the bells at the alley turn earlier in the morning and had assembled, with the long-practiced assembling of a wand-maker, what was coming. "Mr. Potter," he said, "and Master, I have been wondering all morning whether the line would come in person." "The line is here," said the Count. "Yes." Mr. Ollivander stepped out from behind the counter. He looked at Harry. He took in, with his strange pale eyes, the small composed Wallachia heir who stood in front of him. 11 inches, I think, holly phoenix feather, you will find, Mr. Potter, that the holly does not mind that you have grown up under a different roof. The holly chooses by what is inside the boy, not by where the boy slept. He went to the boxes. He came back with a box. He opened it. Harry took the wand. It warmed in his hand. The warmth was familiar. He had, in his life at the castle, used 3 of his father's wands for small workings, and the castle wands had warmed for him. The holly warmed in a different way, more eager, less patient, as though it had been waiting for him in a manner he had not been waiting for it. "Ah," said Mr. Ollivander. The Count looked at Mr. Ollivander. "There is a thing you wish to say." "There is a thing I am required by my custom to say. The phoenix that gave this wand its core gave one other feather. The one that holds that other feather is, by every record I keep, the one that gave Mr. Potter his scar." The Count looked at the wand in his son's hand. He looked at his son. "This is known to you, Mr. Ollivander, and now to me. It is not, today, news that requires a response. The boy has chosen, or has been chosen by, a wand of his own. The other wand belongs to a thing that is not here. The other wand and this wand will, in time, perhaps speak to each other. We will, when that time comes, be in attendance. We will not be unprepared. Thank you for the courtesy of telling us in advance. Master, yes, you are a calm man. I am an old man, Mr. Ollivander. The calm is one of the few advantages of age. We shall pay in old coin, if you will." He paid. Mr. Ollivander, who had been a wand-maker for a long time and had heard a great deal from a great many wand-buyers, accepted the old coin and bowed the small bow of a tradesman who had been spoken to as an equal. They went out of Ollivander's into the rest of the alley. They went to the apothecary, to Flourish and Blots, to the cauldron shop. They were, throughout, a small dignified party that did its business and did not linger. They were back at the great gate of the castle by the 2nd hour after sunset, with the parcels under Hector's arm and the boy walking between his father and his brother in the courtyard light. Harry, that night in the library, sat in his chair with the wand on his knee. He did not, on the first night, work with it. He let it lie there. He looked at it. He let it look at him. Tartar. Yes, the wand is a brother to the wand that scarred me. It is. The thing in my head is the man who owned the wand. It is, in some sense, a piece of him. Yes. Then he and I will, in time, meet again. We have always known this. Yes. I shall not be alone when we do. You shall not. We have always known that, too. The boy looked at the locket at his throat. He set his hand on the wand. He looked at his father. Tartar. Yes. I am going to a school in another country in a month. I shall miss this house. The house will miss you. I shall write to you weekly. Your brother shall write to you weekly. Hector shall write to you. Isaac shall write to you badly, because he writes letters as if they were workings. Varney shall send you objects, not letters. He does not write. You shall hear from us. You shall be alone in the way that students are alone, which is to say in the company of other students. You shall, in time, find a friend or two among them. We shall let you find them. We shall not, on this matter, interfere. Yes, Tartar. He went to bed. He slept with the locket on. The line, in its great careful patience, kept the house around him. On the 1st of September, the small party was at King's Cross by the half-hour before 11. The Count did not, in the strict sense, fit at King's Cross, but the Count had been in London a great many times in 4 centuries and had a number of long coats that flattered the platform light. Adrian was beside him. Hector had stayed at the castle to keep the kitchens in order. On the platform, Harry met 2 children. The first was a small, bushy-haired girl who had been reading a textbook at a great speed and who had, in the course of reading, walked into a luggage trolley belonging to a tall, red-haired family. "Oh, I am sorry," she said, brisk and sincere, gathering the books that had spilled. "I was reading. I have been reading. I have read 17 of the school texts. I have not, in fact, read the corridors of King's Cross sufficiently. Hermione Granger." "Harry," said Harry. He inclined his head, the small inclination. "Of the line of Dracula, in the Western Register, the family Potter. May I help you with the books?" You are." She straightened with 3 books in her arms. She blinked at him. "Harry Potter, in the Western Register, yes." "You speak strangely." "I have been raised in another country." "You have an accent." "I do." "It is a nice accent. Where are you from?" "Wallachia." "In the school year I will, on most documents, be Harry Potter. I will answer to either." "You are, yes. You are reading Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. You will find Chapter 7 the most difficult." "Why?" "The pronunciation is given in the book in a manner that is not how the spell is actually pronounced. I had to be corrected by my brother. I will, if you wish, correct it for you on the train." "I would like that." The second child was the boy whose trolley she had walked into. He was tall for 11, red-haired, freckled, with a great deal of nose and an honest face. "Ron Weasley," he said. He stuck out a hand. He shook with the small enthusiasm of a boy who had been brought up shaking hands. He looked at Harry. He looked at Adrian, who was a tall, pale older brother in a long coat. He looked at the Count, who was. He swallowed. He shook Harry's hand again because he had let go and was not quite sure he had finished. "Ron," said his mother briskly from the platform behind him, "do not." "I am not, Mum, I am not." "Harry," said Harry, and inclined his head. "It is well met, Ron Weasley, you speak." "I do. I have been raised in another country. I shall, on the train, sit with you and Miss Granger if you will have me." Yes. The Count laid his hand for a moment on Harry's shoulder. "My son." "Yes, Tartar, you shall write tonight. You shall write tomorrow. You shall write every day for the first week. After the first week, you shall write twice a week. I shall be at the gate for the winter holidays." "Yes, Tartar." "Be kind, be careful, find a friend. Let them love you in the small, careful manner of school friends, which is its own slow work." "Yes, Tartar, and Harry." "Yes, Tartar. Adrian is at the gate. Hector is at the kitchen. Isaac is in his rooms. Varney is in the forge. Cypher is in her wandering. Trevor is at his keep. The castle is yours. It does not, in your absence, become less yours." "Yes, Tartar." He boarded the train. At Hogwarts, hours later, in the great hall, the Sorting Hat sat on his head. The hat thought a long time. The hat thought longer for him than it had thought for any other student that evening. The hat said, inside his head, in a voice that was old and amused, "You are well taught. Thank you, sir. You have been told mercy. I have been told mercy. You have been told restraint. I have been told restraint. You have been told ambition too, although you do not always notice you have. You are the heir of an old house, child. You have been raised to keep an old house. You will at this school do better in a house that knows how to keep a house. You will not do worse in another, but you will do best in the one I am thinking of. I trust you, sir." The hat, at the end of its long thought, shouted out the word. "Slytherin." The hall, for an instant, was quiet. The hall had been waiting for a different word. The hall, after a small considering moment, applauded, with the slow-growing applause of a hall that had been startled and had decided to be polite. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy made a small space on the bench. Harry, in the small, composed manner he had been raised in, crossed the hall and took the place. He inclined his head. He sat. At the staff table, in the high-backed chair, a man with a sallow face and very black hair watched a small Wallachian Potter sit down at his table and did not, in the strict sense, move his face. Severus Snape had been preparing, for 11 years, to hate a Potter. He had been preparing, on the evidence of his late research, to hate a Potter raised by Muggles. He had not been preparing to hate a Potter raised by Vlad. He looked, for a long moment, at the small, composed boy at his table. He looked at the small inclination of the boy's head when he was greeted by the prefects. He looked at the boy's hands on the table, which were the hands of a boy who had been taught hands. Severus Snape, in the high-backed chair, did not move. He reached slowly for his goblet. He drank. "Most unexpected," murmured Albus Dumbledore from the chair beside him. "Yes," said Severus Snape, who did not, in the strict sense, use contractions and who would not begin this evening. "Headmaster, it is most unexpected. I shall reserve my judgment until I have spent the autumn observing the child." "Will you indeed, Severus?" "Headmaster, I shall, very well, observe him." Severus Snape did not answer. He drank again. Across the hall, at the Slytherin table, a small Wallachian Potter raised his cup, in the small, precise courtesy of a guest at table, to the staff. He inclined his head, the small inclination he had been taught for the head of a house at first meeting. Severus Snape, after a moment, with his face composed, returned the inclination. He returned it the small, precise way it had been offered. It was, in the great hall on the 1st of September, the first time in 19 years that he had inclined his head to a Potter. The hall, in its great careful way, kept all this in its bones. The line, far east, would by morning know that the boy had been put among the snakes, and the line would be pleased, in the long, careful manner of lines that had been planning this evening since 1471. Chapter 3 End Chapter 4 Quirrell the first morning of class. Harry knew there was a parasite in the school. He had not been looking for one. He had been looking, in the way of an 11-year-old at his first proper breakfast in a great hall full of strangers, at the eggs. The eggs at Hogwarts were a different proposition than the eggs at the castle. The eggs at the castle were placed in front of him by Hector with no commentary and were always, in some quiet way, the right temperature. The eggs at Hogwarts were heaped on a platter and were the temperature of a platter, which is to say only sometimes correct, and one had to fetch them oneself. He was at the eggs when the small wrong feeling crossed the hall. It was not a smell. Adrian had taught him to scent unhoused souls, but the scenting had not been a smell in the literal sense. It had been a cool small wrongness on the inside of the nose, like a draught from a closed cupboard one had forgotten was there. Harry had practiced it for a year at the castle, on places where workings had been done, and the working had left a small residue. He had become competent. He smelt it now. It crossed the hall, in a current of air at his shoulder, and went up to the high staff table. He did not, in the strict sense, look up. He had been raised by men who knew the difference between knowing a thing and showing one knew. He continued with the eggs. He buttered a piece of toast. He listened to Hermione Granger, beside him at the Slytherin table. She had been sorted there to her own visible surprise, and to the visible discomfort of perhaps 11 other people, who had, by the second course of the previous evening, mostly recovered. Explain why the porridge was, on a chemical level, of poor consistency. "It is the milk," she said. "It is too high in fat. They have, I think, used a milk." "They have used the milk that came," said Harry mildly, who at the castle had been taught not to argue with milk that had come. He chewed his toast. He scented, with the inside of his nose, the upper staff table again. He located the source. It was not, as he had assumed, the man with the sallow face and the very black hair who had nodded to him. It was the man in the lavender turban, 2 chairs down, who was at the moment laughing nervously at something the headmaster had said. Harry set the toast down. "Hermione?" "Yes, the man in the turban. Who is he?" "Professor Quirrell, Defense Against the Dark Arts." "I have been told he came back from a sabbatical last year. He stutters. He is, the prefects say, not very good. I have been led to expect by reading that he will be at least competent. I shall reserve my judgment until the first lesson." "Yes," said Harry, "reserve it." He did not eat further. He drank his juice. He went to his first class. which was charms with Professor Flitwick, who recognized his name and shook his hand with both of his own and said in his rapid manner that he had been corresponding with Master Vlad and was a great enthusiast for the boy's work on the Wallachian variant of the Lumos charm and would Harry like to demonstrate to the class. Harry, who was 11, agreed. He lit his wand. The light came up gold in the Wallachian color, which the class oohed at, because Hogwarts light came up white. He turned the light off again. He sat. Professor Flitwick, in his small, competent way, set the class loose on the chapter. That night, at the small desk in the Slytherin dormitory that Draco Malfoy had, with a small, noble gesture, indicated was Harry's. Harry wrote his first letter home. He wrote it in Old Slavic, because the alphabet would not be read by anyone in the school whose eyes happened to fall on it, and because Old Slavic was a language his father read in the way most men read their birth tongue. He wrote it short. Tartar, there is a parasite in this school. It is in the turban of the defense master. The defense master is called Quirrell. The smell is the smell Adrian taught me. I do not know yet which of the parasites it is. I write to confirm what we have always known would in some season arrive. Harry. The owl he had been given by Hagrid, a great snowy bird, who had taken to him on the third day and who slept on the bedpost, took the letter at midnight. By breakfast the next morning, he had a reply. Harry, trust your nose. The parasite is what we have always supposed. Read your school books carefully on the question of the Mirror of Erised. The headmaster keeps it and has, this year, set it as a guardian. Do nothing precipitate. Adrian will be in Hogsmeade by the end of the week. Hector will follow in a fortnight by the slow ways. Carry the whip at your belt at all times under your school cloak. Do not draw it without need. Your father. V. Harry, at the Slytherin table, read the letter. He put it in his pocket. He ate. You smile in the morning. Said Draco Malfoy, in the small, precise manner he had begun to use with Harry, the manner of a small alliance built one breakfast at a time. Have you had a letter? I have, from your father, from my father. He writes you regularly. He does. I write him daily. We have an arrangement. My father writes me on Sundays. It is a respectable arrangement. Draco considered the porridge. He looked at Harry's plate. He considered Harry's smile, which was not, in the strict sense, a smile, but which was the small private expression of a boy who had been confirmed in a worry by a man he trusted entirely. Draco did not, in his 11 years, recognize the expression. He recognized only that Harry was, on this morning, calm in a way that did not match the worry that had hung at his shoulders the day before. You are calm today. I am calmer. Why, my father has told me a number of things. Is something the matter? Harry looked at him. He considered his alliance with Draco Malfoy in the cold morning light of the great hall. He weighed it. He chose, in the small Wallachian way of choices, the half-truth that was nearer the friendship than the silence. There is a thing in the school that should not be in the school. My father knows of it. Adults are coming. We are, for the moment, calm. What thing? I do not yet know its name. I know its shape. I shall not this morning point at it. I shall not point at it this term until my father tells me to. I tell you because we have an alliance, and because I will not bring you to harm by not telling you. Stay clear of the lavender turban. Draco looked at the staff table. He looked back at Harry. He did not, in his 11 years, have a Wallachian heir's training in composure, but he had a Malfoy's training in not showing surprise. He nodded. Stay clear of the lavender turban. Yes, good lad. Said Harry, who at 11 had begun unconsciously to talk like Trevor Belmont when he was pleased with a person, and who would for some years not notice. Adrian arrived in Hogsmeade on the 5th day. He took rooms at the Three Broomsticks, in the upstairs room with the south-facing window, and announced himself to nobody. He paid in old coin. Madame Rosmeter, who had been a girl when a different Adrian-like person had taken a different upstairs room a great many years ago, recognized the kind of guest she had and did not ask questions. She brought breakfast at 8. She brought supper at 7. She did not, in between, knock. Adrian wrote a single letter to the headmaster of Hogwarts. Headmaster Dumbledore, I am Adrian Teeps, by the second name Alucard, half-brother to your student Harry. I am in Hogsmeade for the term. I have rooms at the Three Broomsticks. I am at your disposal for conversation, should you wish one. I do not intend to call upon the school. I intend to walk to the gates twice a week. I shall not be admitted. I shall not require to be. I write you this letter so that no one in your house is, in coming weeks, surprised by my presence in your village. A. The headmaster of Hogwarts received this letter at his desk in the round office at the top of the tower. He read it twice. He folded it. He put it in his sleeve. He looked at his phoenix on the perch and said, in the long, thoughtful way he sometimes said things to his phoenix, Fawkes. The line is patient and present. I think we shall this year be in their hands more than they are in ours. I am not, I find, displeased by this. Tell me if I should be. Fawkes, in the way of phoenixes, did not answer. The headmaster, who was not in the strict sense waiting for one, took it as a reply and set the letter aside. The autumn passed. Harry at school was a competent student in the way that a child raised by a long line of competent men is competent. He was not, in the conspicuous sense, brilliant. He was, in the conspicuous sense, well-mannered. He answered when called on, sat upright when at the desk, raised his hand when the answer was true and lowered it when he had only a guess. He was, in charms, a small star. He was, in transfiguration, a slow, patient pupil whom Professor McGonagall watched with the small attention of a woman who had assured a man that his son would be treated as a boy. He was, in potions, a mystery to Professor Snape. The mystery was in this. Severus Snape had set out in the first week to push the boy. He had asked the boy questions of the second-year level. The boy had answered them. He had asked the boy questions of the fourth-year level. The boy had answered 3 of them and conceded 1. He had set the boy, in the second week, an exercise that the third years were currently failing. The boy had not failed it. The boy had also not, at any point, shown the small bristle Severus Snape was used to seeing on a student he had pushed. The boy had, instead, on the third week, taken Severus Snape's wrist as he was passing by his cauldron, and had, with the small, precise courtesy of a Wallachian heir, said, Sir, the stir is set to widdershins in the book. The proper stir, for the leaves you have given me, is deossel for 3 and widdershins for the 4th. I have done the correction. If it offends you that I have done it without asking, I shall in future ask. But, sir, the leaves you have given me were old, and the older the leaves, the more it matters. Severus Snape, who in the strict sense did not use contractions, did not say what he wanted to say, which was something with a contraction in it. He looked at the boy. He looked at the cauldron. He looked at the small, precise stir. You did not learn this from this textbook. No, sir. Where did you learn it? From a man called Isaac, at my father's house. I have, sir, a small library of his on the working of leaves. I shall, if you wish, send for the volume. It is in Wallachian and Latin. He has, sir, a great respect for the potions craft of this country. He has, sir, asked me to bring back, this Christmas, your monograph on the asphodel root, which he has read 3 times and which he intends to read 3 times more. Severus Snape did not, in the strict sense, do anything with his face. He set his hand on the table. He breathed out very slowly by the nose. You will continue. You will use the correction. You will, in your essay this week, explain why the correction is necessary. You will, Potter, write the essay in English. In English, sir, in English. I have read enough Wallachian for one lifetime. Sit down. Sir, he sat down. He wrote the essay that week. The essay was, in Severus Snape's hand the following Monday, returned with marks in red ink along the margin, and at the top in Severus Snape's small, careful script the words, Acceptable. See me on the 3rd lesson of next week, after class. Harry, who at 11 had been raised by Isaac, recognized acceptable as a high mark from a man of certain temperament. He filed the essay in his folio. He went to the 3rd lesson of next week, after class. In Severus Snape's small dark office, the man sat at his desk and looked at the boy in the chair. "Potter, sir, you write a careful hand." "Thank you, sir. You are not on the surface the boy I had expected." "No, sir." "You will, I anticipate, in time prove to be the boy I had expected in some smaller particular. I shall observe you. In the meantime you may, if you have a question for me, ask it." Harry thought. He looked at the man at the desk. He thought of his father's instruction, which had been, when you meet Severus Snape, observe whether he speaks of your mother. If he does, listen. If he does not, do not raise her. He has known your mother. He has known her in a way that is not a way I shall, in this letter, write out for you. Sir. Yes, did you know my mother? The man at the desk did not move. He looked at the boy for a long time, then he said, I did. Was she? She was a great many things, Potter. She was, in particular, kind to me when I had no other kindnesses, and I have spent, in the years since she died, a great deal of effort being unworthy of her kindness. I will not, on this point, speak further this evening. You will, if you wish, ask me again in your second year. I shall, then, have another piece for you. We will go on term by term as you have the patience to ask and as I have the patience to answer. Yes, sir, you may go. He went. He wrote to his father that night, Tartar. Severus Snape knew her. He has said he was unworthy of her kindness. He is willing to speak of her in pieces over the years. I have agreed. Was this right? Harry, by morning the reply was on his pillow. It was right. He is a man who has been at war with himself for a long time. Your mother is his quietest battle. Listen to him in the pieces he is willing to give. Do not press. Tell him when you see him in passing that the line is grateful to him for what he gave her. Do not say more than that. Your father. V. Harry, the following morning, in the corridor outside Potions, said it. He said it in the small Wallachian inclination that he had used for Cypher and for Trevor and for Madame Rosmeter and for the Slytherin prefects and for the headmaster on a Saturday in early October. He said, Sir, the line is grateful to you for what you gave her. Severus Snape did not, in the strict sense, do anything with his face. He inclined his head a quarter-inch. He went on. In the corridor at the back of his throat, in the small private place where a man kept the things he could not say, something at last did the small private thing it had been preparing to do for 19 years. It did not, in the strict sense, weep. It did the equivalent. Severus Snape went to his office and wrote 3 letters that evening, none of which he sent, all of which he kept in a drawer for years. The line, at its great careful patience, was beginning, by way of a son, to repay an old debt that had not been the son's to repay. The line did not mind. The line could be patient on a man's behalf. The autumn went into winter. In December, a troll came into the school. It was a poor, unhappy troll that had been let in for reasons the school never sufficiently explained. Harry and Hermione and Ron, who by November had become the small, unlikely set of friends Harry's father had hoped he would find, were in a corridor when the troll arrived. The troll lifted its club. Harry, in his small Wallachian way, did 3 things at once. He drew the Belmont whip from under his cloak. He asked the troll politely, in the old Slavic that all large, unhappy beings understood, to set down the club, and he set himself, with his feet correctly placed. The foot moves first. Adrian had said, the foot moves first or the foot does not move, between the troll and his friends. The troll, in its great unhappy way, set down the club. It set the club down because the language Harry had asked it in was a language the troll's mother had used, on a long-ago hillside, to call the troll in for the night. Trolls, in their great unhappy way, were children of mothers as well, and the troll's mother had been dead for 900 years, and the small Wallachian voice in the corridor had used the proper words. The troll sat down. Harry put the whip back. He, in Old Slavic, thanked the troll. He asked, in Old Slavic, what had brought the troll there. The troll, in Old Slavic, told him it had been brought, the troll said, by a man with a turban. The troll did not, in the strict sense, like the man with the turban. The troll did not, in the strict sense, like the school. The troll asked if it could go home. Harry looked at Ron. Ron looked at Harry. He says he wants to go home, mate. Yes, we can't, can we? We will. We will arrange it. Stay here. Mind him. Do not in any case raise your wands. He went to find Professor McGonagall. The troll, by midnight, was back on its hillside in the north, by the slow, careful arrangement of one deputy headmistress, one defense master who had been quietly absented from the proceedings by a small Wallachia potter's note slipped under the staff door, and one snowy owl who had flown an old Slavic letter to Hogsmeade and brought back a tall, pale man in a long coat who had, by way of a small, careful sigil drawn at the gate, opened a path for the troll to walk home. The defense master was furious, although nobody saw him be furious. He was furious in the small parasitic way of a thing wedged behind a closed door in a man's head, which had been planning the troll incident for a fortnight as a distraction for a particular Friday evening, and which had been undone in the corridor by a small Wallachian voice the man in the turban had not known the boy possessed. The thing in the turban began, after the troll night, to look at the boy. The boy felt it being looked at. The boy did not, in his classes, look back. He wrote home. His father wrote back. The castle, far east, prepared. By February, the small composed boy and the small bushy-haired girl and the small honest red-haired boy had, between them, assembled in their heads the shape of the school's bad year. They knew about the stone, because Hermione had read a book at the right speed. They knew about the corridor on the 3rd floor because Ron had a brother who told tales. They knew about the dog because they had been there at the wrong door. They knew about the mirror because Harry had been told by his father about the mirror in a letter and had repeated the story to his friends in the dormitory at midnight. They knew by Easter that the stone was the target and that the thing in the turban was the seeker, and they knew that the seeker would, at some quiet hour of a coming evening, try. They were not, in the strict sense, going to be the persons who answered the trying. The line had arranged otherwise. In May, on the night the thing in the turban tried, a number of things happened in concert. In the corridor on the 3rd floor, the dog, whose name was Fluffy, and who in his great innocent way had been kind to Harry across the door once, when Harry had come, in the small Wallachian way, with a small handful of biscuits, was eating a small handful of biscuits Harry had brought him. In a corridor below, Adrian was, by way of the small careful castle sigil at the south door in the school. He should not have been. He did not, in the strict sense, intend to be. The line had decided, in the great careful patience of the line, that Adrian would be in the school that evening. And Adrian had walked, in his great careful patience, through a door no Hogwarts ward had been built to keep closed against the line. Hector was, by way of the kitchen entrance, in the kitchens. He was, by the great careful patience of the line, drinking a cup of tea with a small unbothered house elf called Trinky, who had recognized Hector by the smell of forge soot and had set a kettle on. The line had not, in coming to Hogwarts that evening, refused tea. Below the school, in the chamber under the trapdoor, the thing in the turban was, for the first hour, alone. It went past Fluffy without much difficulty, because biscuits had been refused by Fluffy by the time the man arrived, and Fluffy had not, by the line's quiet arrangement, gone back to alert. It went past the devil's snare with a fire charm. It went past the keys without much trouble. It was a competent flyer and not, in the strict sense, a bad wizard for a parasitically haunted man. It went past the chess. It went past the troll, which had been replaced after the first troll had gone home. It set this troll asleep with a small, ungenerous spell. It went past the potions riddle, which Quirrell had set in earlier weeks, and which he therefore knew the answer to. It came to the mirror of Aerized. In the chamber of the mirror, the man in the turban looked at the mirror. He did not see, in the mirror, what he expected to see. He expected to see himself with the stone. He saw, in the mirror, a small Wallachia potter sitting in a southeast chair in a library in a castle in a country far east, with a book on his lap, and a locket at his throat, smiling the small private smile of a boy who had been read to since he could remember by a father who loved him. The man in the turban stared. The thing in the turban hissed, what is this?" The boy in the mirror looked up. He looked at the man at the mirror. He inclined his head, the small Wallachian inclination, the one the line had taught him for the meeting of an enemy who had not yet declared. "I have been waiting for you, sir." "What? Why, where is the stone?" "The stone is not here. The stone was moved this morning. The headmaster moved it. I am sorry, he was kind enough to inform me. The chamber this evening has me in this mirror and a friend of mine behind you. I should turn around." The man in the turban turned around. In the chamber, in the doorway, was Harry. He was 11 years old that month. He was in his green coat with the Slytherin scarf and the Belmont whip uncoiled at his right hand. Behind him, in the doorway, was a tall, pale man in a long coat, whom the man in the turban had read about and not in his life met. "Adrian Teeps," the man in the turban said. "By the second name, Alucard." "That is my name. You are the Dampier?" "I am." "My brother and I have come, sir, to speak with you. The line would, in the first instance, prefer a conversation. If you will sit. There is no chair in the chamber. We will, in courtesy, remain standing as well." The man in the turban did not sit. He raised his wand. He pointed it. He began, in a sibilant, unsteady voice that was not his own, a curse. The thing the boy did, in the next half-second, had been prepared for 9 years. He moved his foot. He moved it the way Adrian had taught him in a courtyard at dawn at the age of 6. He raised the whip with the wrist Trevor Belmont had taught him at the age of 6.5. He flicked it, in the way Cypher had taught him to flick a healing thread at a small bone, with the gentle, precise arc that the working of the line read as intent. The whip, which had been a Belmont whip, and which had been carried for 5 years by a boy who had not, in 5 years, swung it at a friend, knew the swing of a man who meant a death from the swing of a man who was only making a noise. It read his intent. It struck the man in the turban once, across the wand arm, and the wand left the hand of the man in the turban and skittered to the wall, and the whip came back to Harry's hand the way Trevor Belmont had said it would. The man in the turban screamed. He fell. The turban, with the second strike, came off his head. Harry struck again because Adrian had taught him that the second blow was needed to unhouse the parasite, and the second blow was not aimed at the man, who had not asked to host the parasite and was, in the line's reading, a victim of his own ambition rather than its source. Behind the parasite's small unhoused face there was, for a moment, a long, pale, snake-like nothing of a face that hissed in the chamber. Harry, who had been raised to address the unhoused, addressed it. "Sir," he used Old Slavic, "you will go. You will not return to this school in this year. We are not, in this evening, killing you. We have not the right to kill you yet, and you have not the right to ask. You will go to your other unhoused places. You will be patient. You will, in your time, meet my house. You will, in your time, meet my father. We will then, in a place I will know when I see it, settle our line and yours. We are agreed." The hissing thing in the chamber, in the small unhoused half-second before it was driven out by Adrian's silver sigil at the far wall, did not answer. It looked, in the small mean way an unhoused thing looks, at the boy at the doorway with the whip in his hand and the locket at his throat. It read, in the small mean way it could still read, that the boy was not what it had killed. It read that the line behind the boy was older than its line by some appreciable measure. It read that the chamber it was in was not the chamber it had thought it was. It fled. The man on the floor, who had been Professor Quirrell, breathed once. He did not breathe twice. The parasite, in its leaving, had taken what was left of his life with it. There was nothing, in the great careful method of the line, to be done. Harry knelt. He set his hand for a moment on the dead man's forehead. He said in Old Slavic, the small line for a man who has died in possession of another. He stood, Adrian at the wall, lowered the silver sigil. "Brother, Freight, you did well. Tartar will hear. Tartar will hear. He is, at this hour, in the gallery at the castle reading." He will receive my word in an hour. He will be, in his great careful way, pleased. The headmaster of Hogwarts arrived at the chamber doorway in his robes. He looked at the dead defense master on the floor. He looked at the small, composed Wallachia heir with the whip at his belt. He looked at the tall, pale man in the long coat with the silver sigil. He did not, in the strict sense, sigh, but the air around him sighed. Master Adrian, Mr. Potter, Headmaster, there is, I see, a great deal of paperwork in our future. There is, said Adrian. We will, in the line's great careful patience, assist with it. We will not, in any version of the paperwork, be in the school. We will, in all versions of the paperwork, be the boy and his friends, who came to the chamber out of misplaced bravery and who have, in a small accident, undone a corrupted professor. The line is happy to be unmentioned. Master Adrian, I would on principle prefer not to write a falsehood. You will not write a falsehood. You will write the things that the small composed Wallachia heir and his small bushy-haired friend and his small honest red-haired friend will, by the morning, have prepared for you to write. The boys and the girl had a great adventure in the chamber. The defense master died in the encounter. The stone is, by your own great careful patience, in another country by now. We are agreed. We are agreed. The headmaster of Hogwarts, in his great old practiced way, inclined his head. The line, in its great old practiced way, returned the inclination. The boy, between the two of them, looked from one face to the other, and learned, in the small constant lesson of his 11th year, how two great old practiced houses arranged a thing between them while pretending to consult. That night Severus Snape, in his small dark office at midnight, took the Belmont whip from Harry's belt with the boy's permission and held it in his hand. He turned it. He looked along its length. He did not, in the strict sense, smile. Potter, sir, this is not a school weapon. No, sir. You will, on the morning of every Sunday, present it to me. I shall inspect it. I shall return it. We will not, you and I, ever speak of this inspection. We will, by the inspection, satisfy a great many people that the school is responsible without troubling the school with the actual responsibility. We are agreed. We are agreed. He returned the whip. He sat. He looked at his desk. Potter, sir, your mother loved you. Yes, sir, I know. She would this evening have been very proud of you. Yes, sir, thank you. Get out, Potter. He got out. He wrote home. The line, at midnight, received the letter. The line did not, in the strict sense, sleep, but the line on that night came as close to peaceful as a line of its history could come. In the morning, in the small dark office, Severus Snape wrote a letter east. He addressed it to the master of the line of Dracula with respects. He wrote in it 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph was a report on the chamber. The second paragraph was a report on the boy. The third paragraph was a sentence. The sentence said, "You have done with him, sir, what I would have wished done with myself had any hand been put on me young enough." Severus Snape. He sent it. The line received it the following dawn. The Count read it in the gallery. He folded it. He put it, in his careful way, in the small drawer of his desk, where he kept letters that mattered. He went down to the courtyard to wait for his sons. The Hogwarts Express delivered Harry, in the great careful way of trains, at King's Cross at 11 in the morning of the last day of June. The Count was on the platform. Adrian was beside him. Hermione was there with her mother and father, and Ron was there with his mother and Ginny and Fred and George, and Harry, in the small composed way of a Wallachia heir who had become a small composed schoolboy, embraced Hermione, correctly, with the small inclination, shook Ron's hand twice. Because Ron forgot, and turned to his father, the Count looked at his son. "Tartar, my son, I have come home. You have come home. The line is glad." He put his hand for a long moment on Harry's head. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. The line, at King's Cross on the last day of June, did its small public ratification of a year well kept. They went, by way of a small Wallachia portkey the Count had brought in his coat pocket, and which set down, in old courtesy, in the courtyard of the castle home. That summer the boy was 12. The summer, in the slow, careful method of the castle, made him calmer, taller, faster at sword, more careful at whip. The summer made him fluent in a Hungarian he had only been serviceable in. The summer added a small new careful working to his repertoire, one Isaac had been waiting to teach. The summer added a letter from cipher that contained a small drawing of a flower and the words "You smelt the parasite. I am proud of you. Be kind to the man who carried it. We will, in our time, meet again." In a long room with a long table, in a hearth with a small careful flame, in a castle that had been adjusting for 10.5 years to having a small body at the center of it, a man and a boy and a brother and a forgemaster and an alchemist and a forgemaster sat one evening for dinner. And the man at the head of the table inclined his head to his son, and the son returned the inclination, and the line, in its great careful patience, ate. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The Triwizard Year, the second year, in the long careful narrative of his life, was the year of the snake. There was a basilisk under the school. There had been one since, before any of the masters in the present staff had been alive, except, of course, for the small, unhappy ghost of a girl in a flooded bathroom who knew more about it than anyone wished her to. There was, in the school that autumn, a stupid hand using a stupid object to wake the snake up. The line, by November, had assembled the shape of the matter. The line did not, in the strict sense, send Adrian for the snake. The line sent, by way of a sealed crate that arrived at Hogsmeade on a foggy afternoon, a single castle servant. He was a small servant of long standing, a man called Florin, who had been at the castle since the line had reached for him in 1734, and who had, in the centuries since, become the line's specialist at unhappy old creatures who had been left in places too long. Florin, in the chamber under the school, had a conversation with the basilisk in Old Slavic. Old Slavic was, the basilisk allowed, the third language it had been spoken to in, but the first that had not been spoken at it with intent to insult. Florin asked in Old Slavic what the basilisk wished. The basilisk, in Old Slavic, wished to go home, and home was not a chamber under a school. Home, the basilisk explained, was a small stone bowl in a mountain in Greece, which it had been taken from in the year of someone called Salazar by an arrangement the basilisk no longer remembered the terms of. Florin, who had been to that mountain in 1750, said that the small stone bowl was still there. He said he could take the basilisk to the small stone bowl. He said the journey would be cold and dark and would take, in the line's slow, careful method of moving large, unhappy creatures, 3 months. The basilisk, in Old Slavic, agreed. They went. The hand using the stupid object found, by midwinter, that the chamber was empty and that the stupid object had stopped being useful. The hand was, by mid-spring, identified by Harry and his friends as a small first year called Ginny Weasley, who had been used by the stupid object without her permission. They took the stupid object off her by means of a small careful working Adrian had sent from Hogsmeade. They took it to Hector. Hector, in the kitchens at the castle in May, looked at it for 1.5 hours and then split it open with a small black knife. The piece of unhoused soul inside it, having been parted from its anchor, went up the kitchen chimney without further ceremony. The line, that summer at the castle, told the boy that there had been 6 such stupid objects in the world. He had now, the line said, by way of him personally, removed 2. There were 4. The line had a plan for the 4. The plan was patient and would take, the line said, some years. Tartar. Why has nobody else gone looking for them? Because nobody else has the line. Because the soft West has not had, since the Second War of the Cromwell, an old house competent at this work. Because the 4 are hidden behind workings that would, in the soft West, be unfamiliar. We are not unfamiliar. We are calm. We shall, by the autumn of your 5th year, have found 3 of the 4. We shall, by your 6th year, have removed 3 of the 4. The 4th is in you. The 4th we shall remove at a time we shall choose together. We are agreed. We are agreed. In the 3rd year, the autumn was the autumn of an escape. A man had broken out of a wizard prison in the soft west. The papers described him as a murderer. The line, on reading the papers, did not. The line had a record at the castle of the man in question, who had been the godfather of the small boy, and the line had been quietly maintaining the record for 12 years. The record said, Sirius Orion Black, innocent of the act for which he is imprisoned. The line apologizes for not, in 12 years, finding the institutional patience to free him. The man was, in the record, restless and proud and brave and badly served by his school. The line had been waiting for the right hour. The right hour, in the strict sense, had not arrived. The man had decided to make his own hour. He came to Hogsmeade in the 2nd week of his escape. Adrian, in the upstairs room at the Three Broomsticks, in his great careful way, had been expecting him for a week. He had set a kettle on the hearth for him. He had laid out a plate of bread. He had left on the desk by the window a letter sealed in red with a dragon coiled into a circle. The letter said, To Mr. Black, the line of Dracula is on your side. We have been on your side for 12 years. Come to my room. We will, in conversation, sort the matter. I am, in the line's manner, not difficult to find. I am only difficult to reach. Teeps, Sirius Black, in his great proud manner, came to the room. He was thin and bearded and not, in the strict sense, sane, but he was sane enough to recognize a kettle that had been set on for him. He sat. He drank his tea. He ate his bread. He listened. By dawn he had been told a great many things. By the 2nd dawn he had been moved, by way of a small Wallachia portkey, to the castle. By the 3rd dawn he had been bathed and fed and put in a guest room with a soft mattress and had slept for 31 hours. By the end of the week he had met Harry in the library by the small careful arrangement of the Count, who had wished the meeting to be private and unhurried. My godson. Sirius, my godfather, I have read about you in my father's records. I have wished for 12 years to be able to write to you. I shall now, with your permission, write to you weekly. Yeah, that. Yes, kid, write to me weekly. Sirius Black, in the southeast chair of the library, with the Count standing by the hearth and Adrian standing by the door, did the small, unfamiliar thing of crying. He did not cry, in the strict sense, much. He cried in the manner of a man who had not been permitted to cry in 12 years. He cried for half an hour. He drank more tea. He laughed. He cried some more. He laughed. He sat with the boy. He held the boy's hand for some considerable time in the manner of a godfather who had been delayed 12 years in holding his godson's hand and was now making up for it. By the end of the 3rd year, Sirius was at the castle as a long-term guest. He had not been cleared in the soft west. The line was, by way of certain old correspondences with certain old foreign ministries, working on it. The work was slow. The work would, the Count said, be finished in another 2 years. Sirius was, in the meantime, fed and bathed and gardened and had a number of quiet conversations with the Count about the rebuilding of a self that had been left in a cell. He was, on the day Harry went back to school for the 3rd year, on the front steps with the Count. He embraced the boy. He clapped him on the shoulder. He said, Write me, kid. I will, godfather, every week, twice. In the 3rd year at Hogwarts, the school was full of soft west prison guards, dementors. They had been set there for the protection of the school against the man who had escaped. They were a poor choice of guardian. They cooled the corridors and chilled the children and produced, in the small composed Wallachia Potter, a small unfamiliar effect. The effect was this. Dementors, in the small reading of the line, were a soft west variation of a thing the line called the empty. They fed, the line said, on the small warm presences of the well. The line had a defense for them, in the small careful working of Cypher Belnades, who in the previous summer had visited the castle and had spent an evening teaching Harry the working, because Cypher had read the papers and had not approved. The working was, in essence, a small speaker thing. A patronus, in the soft west terminology, but cast in the speaker manner, which produced a different shape and a different color. Harry's Patronus, in the 3rd year, came out at the 2nd attempt and was a small running stag the colour of old gold. It was, his father wrote when Harry sent the description home, his father's stag and his mother's gold, and the lines running. The line, the letter said, was pleased. The 3rd year ended. He came home. He spent a summer with his godfather and his father and his brother and a number of letters from his friends. He learned an additional working of Hector's. He learned from Sirius, a kind of laugh he had not, in his life, heard, and which by the end of the summer he was producing about 3 times a week, with a small startled enjoyment of himself each time. The 4th year, in the long, careful narrative of his life, was the year he was made a champion. The Triwizard Tournament had been brought back. The Goblet of Fire had been set in the Great Hall. On the appointed evening, in the cold of October, the goblet had produced, against every rule of its making, the name Harry Potter on a 4th slip of parchment. He had not, in the strict sense, put it in. Nobody asked. The Count, on receiving the letter, came west. He did not, in the strict sense, come to the school. He came to Hogsmeade. He took the upstairs room at the 3 Broomsticks next to Adrian's. He paid in old coin. Madame Rosmeter, who had grown used to having the line at her inn, brought him a kettle and a plate of bread and a small bowl of olives from a jar she had not, in 5 years, broken into for anyone. She set them down. She did not, in the strict sense, courtesy at him, but she did the small Wallachian inclination she had picked up from Adrian over 3 years, and the Count returned it, the small, precise way. He sat at the desk by the window. He wrote in his long, careful hand 3 letters. The first letter was to the headmaster of Hogwarts. It said, "The line is in Hogsmeade. We are present. We are calm. We are, in particular, calm about a contest in which our son has, against the rules of your goblet, been made a champion. We will, in the line's great careful method, permit your school to attempt to manage this. We will, in the line's great careful method, attend in person at the 3rd task, which is the task of the maze, which is the task at which the small, careful trap has been set. We do not need today to disagree with your school. We will, in our time, disagree if disagreement is owed. We will not, in the meantime, withdraw the boy. The boy has, in the small, careful method of his upbringing, asked to compete. We have, in the small, careful method of our line, permitted. We are agreed. The second letter was to his son. It said, I am at the inn. Your brother is at the inn. We are present. Compete. Do not be reckless. The dragon will, on the morning of the first task, be willing to hear an old greeting in Old Slavic. The lake will be cold, but not colder than the river you swam in 2 summers ago. The maze, when the time comes, is a maze and not a maze. We will, in attendance, do our part. Tartar, the 3rd letter was to Severus Snape. It said, Master Snape, the line is in your village. We thank you for the small care you have given our son. We are here to assist. Where you can, attend to the small careful matter of his shoulders, which I am told tense at the 3rd hour after midnight. He has, since he was small, dreamt in that hour, and his dreams are sometimes loud. V. He sent the letters. Madame Rosmeter took them to the gates of the school by the slow, careful evening route. By morning the boy had his. The boy had been concerned. The boy, on reading the letter, set the letter down on the breakfast table and ate a piece of toast with butter. He had not in 2 days had butter. Hermione, across from him, watched him eat the toast. Your father has written you. He has come. He is in Hogsmeade, with my brother. Are you no longer worried? I am no longer worried in the way I was. I am now worried in the way I was raised to be, as a man who has work to do. You are not yet a man, Harry. I am nearly 14. The line counts at 13. I am, by the line's reckoning, a man for 1.5 years now. I am, by the soft-west reckoning, a child for 4 more. I am, this morning, the man my line says I am, and there is, on the morning, a dragon. You will not duel a dragon. I will not duel a dragon. What will you do? I will, at the appointed hour, ride one. He rode the dragon at the first task. He did not ride it in the strict sense. He did not, in the strict sense, get on its back. The dragon was a Hungarian horntail, which his father had, in his small, careful method, briefly visited at 4 in the morning of the task day, when nobody was about, and which had recognized in the small, careful Wallachian-spoken visitor a kind of speaker the Hungarian dragons had not heard in 2 centuries. The dragon had, by the morning, been very gently informed that there would be a small boy of the line at the task, and that the small boy of the line would, in the small, careful Wallachian manner, give the proper old Slavic greeting at the proper time, and the proper old Slavic greeting would, in the small understanding of dragons, be enough. Harry stood in the arena. He did the greeting. The dragon, in the small understanding of dragons, recognized it. The dragon, in the small understanding of dragons, did not eat him. He did the small task assigned. He took the golden egg from the nest. He did not, in the strict sense, fly. He did not, in the strict sense, duel. He walked, in the small, careful Wallachian manner, around the back of the dragon, while the dragon, in the small understanding of dragons, watched him with the polite attention of a great old creature whose mother had once taught the Wallachian visitor's grandmother how to nurse a clutch on a cold night. He took the egg. He walked back. He held the egg up. He went out of the arena. The crowd, which had been preparing to scream, did not. The crowd, which had been preparing for a duel, did not get a duel. The crowd, which had been preparing for at least a maiming, was disappointed in the small, mean way crowds are sometimes disappointed when they have been preparing for a maiming. The judges, in their small, officious method, did not know how to score it. They gave him 8 out of 10, on the theory that a duel had not occurred and a duel had been expected. The dragon, on her way back to the pen, looked once at the judges' table and made, in the small understanding of dragons, the small noise of a polite dragon at the conclusion of a polite encounter. 3 of the dragon keepers, at the noise, took small steps backward without intending to. The second task was the lake. The lake was cold. The lake was a great deal colder than the river he had swum in 2 summers ago, regardless of what his father had written. He swam it anyway. He used the gillyweed Neville Longbottom had, in the small, unexpected method of friendship, pressed into his hand at breakfast. He found, at the bottom, a small composed Hermione and a small composed Ron and a small unknown Vila girl tied to a rock. He brought up all 3 by the line's small, careful preference for not leaving people at the bottom of lakes. He came up second on the timing. The crowd, on the lake's surface, screamed approvingly. The judges, in their small, officious method, gave him second place by score and also by a small, careful bonus point for not leaving the Vila girl, which Madame Maxime had requested in a tone Madame Maxime had not previously used in the contest. The Vila girl, on the bank, kissed both his cheeks and then, in the small, startled method of an 11-year-old who had also been brought up, her small, composed sister also kissed both his cheeks, and Harry, in the small, careful method of a small, composed Wallachian Potter, returned the cheek kiss with the proper Wallachian inclination, which had to be explained to the Vila by their mother in the carriage afterward, in a tone that the Vilas had not previously heard from their mother either. The third task was the maze. The third task, his father had said, was a maze and not a maze. He had, by the morning of the third task, understood what his father had meant. The maze was a maze on the surface. The maze, by the line's reading of the small, careful preparations of certain people in certain rooms, was also a portkey. It was, in the strict sense, a delivery system. The maze was designed to deliver a small Wallachian Potter to a certain graveyard at a certain hour, and the delivery system was the cup at the maze center. He had been preparing for this for a month. His father, in the long upstairs room at the inn, had been preparing for it for the same month. Adrian, in the long upstairs room, had been preparing for it for the same month. Hector, who had come to the inn for the third task, was preparing for it. Isaac, who had come for the third task, was preparing for it. Varney, who had not in 2 centuries left the forge, had come for the third task, and was, in his great careful patience, preparing for it. Cypher, who had been wandering, had come, and had taken the small room across the corridor. Trevor, who had been at his keep with a niece who had finally consented to thank him for the keep, had come, and had taken the room next to Cypher's. Sirius, who had been at the castle, had come, and had taken the room next to the Count's. The line, on the night of the third task, was in Hogsmeade in its complete number. The line did not, in the strict sense, attend the maze. The line attended the second half of the maze, which was the half that was not at the maze. The line had set, in the small, careful method of an old house that had attended such evenings before. 3 small workings around the place where the portkey was expected to deliver the small, composed Wallachian potter. The first working was a small Adrian sigil at the south wall of the graveyard. The second working was a small Hector sigil at the north wall. The third working was Varney, in person, in the Lickgate, where he had been since the previous evening at the courteous invitation of a long-dead sexton's ghost, who had recognized in the small forgemaster the small forgemaster's master and had, at a small word from Varney, agreed. In the maze, Harry was paired in the final stretch with Cedric Diggory. Cedric, in the small composed method of a young man who had been raised by a kind father in the soft West, had agreed with Harry in the 3rd week of October that they would, if it came to it, take the cup together. Harry, by the morning of the 3rd task, had told Cedric, in the careful indirect Wallachian method, that taking the cup together might be more complicated than Cedric supposed. Cedric had asked, Harry had explained. Cedric, in his great kind soft West way, had said, I shall take the cup with you anyway. We shall arrive at the wherever together. We shall, in the wherever, have my wand at your back. We are agreed, Harry had said. They took the cup together. They arrived at the graveyard. The graveyard, in the small understanding of the line, was the graveyard of the Riddle family. It was an unhappy little graveyard with stones leaning the wrong way and a yew tree that had been planted with bad intent. There was, in the center of the graveyard, a small cauldron over a small fire. There was, beside the cauldron, a small rat-like man with a bundle in his arms. The small rat-like man saw the 2 boys. He stared. He had not been expecting 2, he had been expecting 1. Kill the spare. Hissed the bundle, in a sibilant voice, in the imperious manner of a man who was not, on this occasion, a man. The small rat-like man raised his wand. Cedric, who had in the 3rd week of October been warned and who had in the 3rd week of October prepared, was already moving. He had set his wand at the rat-like man before the rat-like man had set his at Cedric. He spoke a binding charm. The 2nd-year level cipher had drilled him in by post for a month. The rat-like man's wand left his hand. He fell, in the small bound manner of a man bound by a speakerform binding, into the long grass at the base of the cauldron. Cedric, behind me, stand at the gate. Do not come forward. Yes, Cedric went to the gate. Harry walked forward. He did not, in the strict sense, draw the whip. He did not, in the strict sense, draw the wand. He stood at the edge of the small fire. He looked down at the bundle in the long grass, which had been dropped by the rat-like man as the rat-like man fell. The bundle was, in the small reading of the line, the thing that had killed his mother. It was not, on the night, in a body. It was in a small, unfinished body, a body that had been growing in the bundle for some time at the small rat-like man's expense. But it was not yet, on the night, a man. It was about to be a man. The ritual on the small fire required 3 ingredients. The first ingredient was bone of the father, unknowingly given. The bone, in the small earth at the foot of the headstone behind the cauldron, had been disturbed earlier in the evening. A small handful of it was, even now, in the cauldron. The second ingredient was flesh of the servant, willingly given. The rat-like man's right hand, in a small cut, was bleeding. The third ingredient was blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. The third ingredient was Harry's, The bundle in the long grass hissed at him. "Potter, boy, come close. The cauldron is hot. We have an arrangement to complete." Harry inclined his head, the small inclination he had been taught for an enemy who had not yet declared. "Sir, the cauldron is hot. We do not have an arrangement to complete. You have come." "I have. I have not come to be your third ingredient. You have come alone." "I have not." He raised his hand, the small, careful raise that was the castle's sign for opening. He had, in the maze, carried in his pocket the small medallion Varney had made for him in the 3rd week of October, which was a castle key in the shape of a sigil. He set the medallion on the ground at his feet. He turned the medallion a small quarter turn with his foot, in the small, careful gesture Adrian had taught him in May. The graveyard, between one heartbeat and the next, was less alone. At the south wall, Adrian was standing in his long coat. At the north wall, Hector was standing in his shirt sleeves with a forge hammer in his right hand. At the lit gate, Varney was standing, and the small forgemaster's small, careful presence at a lit gate had a small effect on the air around it that the bundle in the long grass, in its small reading, did not approve of. Beside the great old yew tree, Cypher was standing, with her staff in her hand and her cousin's fire ready at her shoulders. Beside the 3rd headstone east, Trevor Belmont was standing, with the great Belmont whip, the family whip, the vampire killer, uncoiled in his hand. Beside the 4th headstone east, Sirius Black was standing, a thinner man than the man in the prison photographs, and behind Sirius, in the small, careful manner of a phoenix who had come because his headmaster had asked him with the proper words, Fawkes was at his shoulder. On a low perch made of air, and in the small, careful center of the graveyard, between the cauldron and the lit gate, walked the Count. He was in his long coat, the coat he had worn at Godric's Hollow on the night the line had reached for the small one. He was not, in the strict sense, hurried. He never was. He walked in his great careful patience to the small fire. He stopped 6 paces from the cauldron. He looked down at the bundle in the long grass. Lord Voldemort, the bundle in the long grass hissed, "Dracula, yes, you are not here." "I am here, this is." "This is not. You have. The boy. The boy is mine. He has been mine for 13.5 years. You have, in the centuries you have been making yourself, decided to call yourself a Dark Lord. We are, in this graveyard, 2 Dark Lords. There are not, ordinarily, 2 of us in one country, and we have not, in this graveyard, been introduced. I have come, at last, to be introduced." He inclined his head. It was the inclination of a man who had been taught manners by a generation that no longer existed. It was offered, in the small, careful method of the line, to a man who had, on the night, nobody to inclinate in return, and who would not, in any season, have known the inclination if he had. The bundle in the long grass, in its small reading, did not return the inclination. The bundle in the long grass began, in the small, unfinished body, to plan. Above the maze, in the school grounds, on the air at the rim of the cup of the sky, Adrian had, in the small, careful method of an old house, opened a small portal. Through the portal, in the small, careful method of an old house, the line had come. Through the portal, in the small, careful method, the line would not, this evening, leave until the line had finished what it had come for. The boy, in the center of the graveyard, between the cauldron and the lit gate, with his father at his shoulder, looked down at the small thing in the long grass that had, 13 years ago, in another small place, taken a green light to a woman with red hair, and stood. In the small, composed Wallachia manner, with his hand near his locket and his foot in the second guard. The graveyard, in the small understanding of the line, was very quiet. The line, in its great careful patience, was about to speak. Before the speaking, though briefly the line might consent to pause for a thought, the boy was permitted a small private thought of his own. He thought of the locket at his throat, and the small piece of red hair inside it, and the small folded letter that said, "Be alive, be good, be kind." He thought of a small wooden sword in a long courtyard at dawn. He thought of a hand on his head in a library at the end of a 9th birthday. He thought of a speaker's blue eyes across a table in his 6th year, asking him whether the killing of a Dracula had been a good killing, and being given the small good answer of a 6-year-old who had been taught that some questions deserved their honest weight. He thought, in the small Wallachian way of the line, that the line was not, on this evening, doing anything new. The line had been at this graveyard for 2 centuries by way of letters and ledgers and a small careful patience. The graveyard had only, on the evening, become a graveyard. The line had been arriving at it, in the long careful method of the line, for as long as the small thing in the long grass had been making itself. He thought, very briefly, of his mother. He thought of her in the small competent method his father had taught him, the way one thought of a person whose hand was at one's shoulder, as a presence, not a memory. He set the locket lightly against his sternum with the back of his thumb. "Tartar, my son, he is here. He is here. He has not the body yet. He has not. He shall not this evening have it. The third ingredient he is awaiting was the third ingredient he was never going to have. We have, in the small careful method of the line, withheld it." "Yes, Tartar," the bundle in the long grass hissed again. The bundle could not, in the bound state, raise its head. It could speak. It spoke, in the imperious sibilance it had always favored, the small thing it had been preparing to say for some time. "Dracula, you are old. You are unhoused in your own way. You have, in your long years, learned a small useful patience. I shall give you a small useful proposal. Step aside. Leave the boy. Take the cauldron, take the servant, take the body. I shall, in turn, leave you. I shall not, in the centuries of your remaining, intrude upon your country. We are, in our way, lords of the same kind. The boy is a small inconvenience to both of us. Spare us each the inconvenience." The Count looked at the bundle in the long grass. He did not, in the strict sense, move his face. The line never did. The line, in the small careful method, did the small careful thing of waiting until the bundle had finished speaking, and then waited a small additional courteous interval. And then, in the long careful Wallachian manner, did the small precise thing the line did with proposals of that shape. "Lord Voldemort, yes, you have, in the long careful method of your making, never had a son." The bundle was silent. "You have, in the long careful method of your making, never had a brother." The bundle was silent. "You have, in the long careful method of your making, never had a kinswoman die in a soft western country and leave behind a small green-eyed child for an old eastern line to recover." The bundle was silent. "The proposal you have offered me, sir, is the proposal of a man who has not understood, in 70 years, what a line is. I shall, in the conversation we are about to have, attempt to explain. I shall be patient. The boy is in no hurry. The line is in no hurry. The night is long. The line, at the 4 walls and the Lickgate and the yew tree and the 3rd headstone east and the 4th headstone east, did not move. The line, in the small careful method, waited. The line, in the great careful method, had a long evening ahead of it. The bundle in the long grass, in the small reading of the small unfinished body in which the bundle resided, began to understand, in the small mean way a small mean thing understands a thing too late, what kind of graveyard it was in. Chapter 5 End Chapter 6. The hand on the shoulder, the bundle in the long grass, in the small mean way a small mean thing reads a room it has lost, called. It called the way it had been calling for some years to those who wore its mark. The call was not, in the strict sense, a sound. It was a small pressure on the inside of a forearm in a number of houses around the soft west and a number of houses in the colder corners of the east. The pressure asked. The pressure summoned. The pressure had, in its long, careful method, been answered before. It expected, on the evening, to be answered. It was answered. They began to arrive in small dark figures around the perimeter of the graveyard. They came by apparition. They came in the small, twisted manner of men who had been called and who had, in the calling, obeyed. They came in robes the color of bad nights. They came in masks the color of the wrong moon. They came, in 12 and in 20, and in a great many. By the third of the small twisted arrivals, the line, around the walls and at the lit gate and beside the U, had not moved. The line, in the small careful method, waited until the arrivals had reached the number the bundle had hoped for. The line, in the small careful method, did not interrupt a count that was not yet complete. When the arrivals had numbered 30 and had drawn into a ragged circle a small distance back from the cauldron, the bundle in the long grass spoke again. My friends. The ragged circle did not, in the strict sense, kneel. The ragged circle was, in the small mean reading of the bundle, ready to begin the small ceremonial kneel that had been planned for the resurrection. The ragged circle, by the same token, also was, on the evening, in the small reading of its own 30 pairs of eyes, beginning to notice the persons at the south wall and the north wall and the lit gate and the yew tree and the headstones east. The man at the south wall, in the long coat, with the white gold hair, did not, in the strict sense, smile. He inclined his head, the small precise inclination of a dampier who had been waiting for a count to be complete. The pale masked nearest to the south wall took a half-step backward without intending to. The man at the north wall, in shirt-sleeves, with a forge hammer in his right hand, did not, in the strict sense, smile either. He looked along the ragged circle the way a smith looks along the length of an iron he had thought was straight, and is now wandering about. 3 of the pale-masked nearest to him also took a half-step backward, without intending to. The man at the lit gate, in the long apron, did not look at any of them in particular. He looked at the lit gate the way a smith looks at his work. The lit gate, in its small, careful method, had begun, on his arrival, to remember a number of things about itself that the lit gate had, in years of disuse, forgotten. The lit gate, on the evening, was, in its great careful method, a gate again. The pale-masked nearest to it, who had been considering retreating through it, did not. And the man between the cauldron and the lit gate, in the long coat, with the small precise inclination, looked at the ragged circle. He looked at it without hurry. He looked at it the way a man looks at a herd of horses that have wandered onto his property, and that he is, in his great careful patience, deciding what to do with. He looked at it long enough that 2 of the pale-masked, in the small dishonorable manner of men who had been called and who were beginning to wonder whether the calling had been an error, apparated away. The line did not, in the strict sense, prevent them. The line did not consider their leaving relevant. When 2 more had apparated away, the bundle in the long grass, in its small reading, understood. It hissed. Wormtail. The bound man in the long grass, in his small unhappy method, did not answer. He was, in the bound state, in no condition to. The blood. Take the blood. Begin. The bound man could not move. The bundle in the long grass, in its small unfinished body, in its great mean understanding, did what it had decided some considerable time ago it would not need to do. It used the small remaining strength of the small unfinished body to lift its head a quarter-inch. It looked at the small Wallachian potter at the small fire's edge. Boy, yes, sir, you have made me unhappy. Yes, sir, I have not in the strict sense intended to. You have made me wait. I have, the line believes in patience. You will die. In some season, yes, the line does not in the strict sense deny death. We respect death. We have, in the line's long history, lost a great many to it. We have not, in the line, made the mistake of attempting to refuse it. I have refused it. Yes, sir, I know, I have read about it. I am sorry. It is a great unhappiness. We have in the line been wishing for some considerable time to undo it for you. We are not, on the evening, here to undo it on your terms. We are here on the evening to begin the undoing on ours. We are agreed. We are not agreed. I am sorry, sir. We are agreed in the small, careful method of the line with or without you. The line, in its long centuries, has learned that some agreements are made by one party with the heir, and the heir, in its way, signs. The line, in the small, careful method, returned to silence. The Count walked the 6 paces between him and the cauldron. He did not, in the strict sense, hurry. He walked in the small, precise method of a man who had walked a great many corridors over a great many centuries and who knew in his bones how a corridor was walked. He arrived at the cauldron. He looked down at it. He set, for a moment, his fingers to the rim. The fire under the cauldron, in the small, careful reading of an old hand, lowered itself a quarter flame. He turned. He went around the cauldron. He stopped at the small fire's other side, near the bundle in the long grass. He went down on one knee. He set, in the small, careful method of an old hand, his palm flat to the cold earth 6 inches from the bundle. He spoke, in Old Wallachia, in a voice that did not, in the strict sense, address the bundle. The voice addressed the earth. I am here as Vlad of the line of Dracula. I have come, in the long, careful method of the line, to a graveyard not of my house. I greet, in the line's manner, the dead who sleep here. I greet, in particular, the man who is unwillingly the bone of the cauldron's first ingredient. I greet his wife, who is some yards to the north. I greet his son, who is buried not here, by a small contrivance of grief. I have come on a matter that touches them. I shall, in the small, careful method of an old hand, conduct that matter with their permission. He waited. The earth did not, in the strict sense, answer. The headstones around the graveyard did the small private thing they did when they had been spoken to with proper words. They settled a quarter inch. The yew tree by the wall lowered one of its branches a fraction. The Count, in the long, careful method, rose. Lord Voldemort, Dracula. You have, in the long, careful method of your making, taken from many. You have, in the small, mean way, taken sons from fathers. You have taken fathers from sons. You have taken, in this graveyard, the bone of a man who did not, in his life, ask to be your father, and who did not, in his death, consent to be your first ingredient. The earth has, on the evening, heard from me. The earth, in its small, careful method, asks me to undo, in your name, the small, mean thing you have done with the bone. The bundle hissed. You shall not. The cauldron has the bone. The Count, in the long, careful method, did not answer. He turned to the cauldron. He set his palm again to the rim. He spoke a small word in Old Slavic. The cauldron, in the small, careful reading of an old hand, tipped a quarter inch, and the small portion of bone that had been within it slid back, in the small, obedient method of an iron pot that had been spoken to with proper words, into a small, folded cloth the Count held in his other hand. He folded the cloth. He set it in the inside pocket of his coat. He would return the bone, by the slow, careful evening route, to the small earth at the foot of the proper headstone on the proper night. He turned back to the bundle. The first ingredient is no longer in your cauldron. The bundle, in the long grass, hissed. The ragged circle, in the small, mean understanding of the ragged circle, had by now lost 6 more of its members to apparition. The ragged circle was, by the Count, at 22, and by the small, mean reading of the bundle's other arrival was, in another minute, going to be at 19. Adrian, at the south wall, lifted his hand. The hand made the small, careful Adrian sigil that, in the small, careful method of the line, was the line's polite request for cooperation from witches and wizards who were, on the evening, in over their heads. We have. He said, in his clear, courtly voice that carried in the small, cold air of the graveyard, no quarrel with most of you. We know, in the small, careful method of the line, that some of you were called and answered out of fear and not love. We invite you, in the small, careful method of the line, to leave. We shall not, in the small, careful method of the line, pursue. We shall not, in the small, careful method of the line, record your faces this evening. We shall not, in the small, careful method of the line, identify you to your ministry. We are, on the evening, interested in one person only. The rest of you may go. The ragged circle, in its small, mean uncertainty, began in 2s and 3s to apparate. By the time Adrian had finished speaking, 10 more were gone. By the next minute, 6 more were gone. The ragged circle, by the 3rd minute, was a ragged not quite half of itself, and the remaining men were the men who had, in the small mean way, no fear of the line because they had not, in the small mean way, understood it. The line around the graveyard did not, in the small careful method, mind the remaining men. The remaining men were, on the evening, a manageable number for Isaac, who had, in the small careful method, been waiting for them at the third headstone east, by the small precise courtesy of the Count, who had put him there for a reason. Isaac stepped, in his small careful method, out from behind the headstone, in the long coat the line had given him in 1790, with the small books at his belt and the small careful pieces of his work at his hands. He did not, in the strict sense, hurry. He went, in his great careful method, to the remaining men. What followed between Isaac and the remaining men would not, in the line's long careful method of recording, be written down in any history of the world. It was not in the line's reading history. It was small. It was managed. It was, in the line's great careful method, undone with the small precision Isaac had been waiting to undo it with for 19 years. The graveyard, by the 7th minute, was empty of pale-masked men. The graveyard was, in the small careful reading of the line, what the line had wished it to be, a graveyard with the Count and the bundle in the long grass at its center. Lord Voldemort, Dracula, we are alone. We are not. We are alone enough. The line at the walls is in attendance. The line at the walls will not, in the long careful method of the line, interfere. The line at the walls has agreed, between us 4 hours ago at the inn, that the conversation between us tonight is, in the line's reading between us, I shall conduct it. The line shall hold the perimeter. We are agreed. The bundle in the long grass did not, in the strict sense, hear an answer it preferred. The bundle in the long grass did not have an answer to give. The Count went down on one knee. He went down beside the bundle in the long grass. He did not, in the strict sense, lift it. He did not, in the strict sense, touch it. He set himself, in the long careful method of a man who had been waiting a great many years for a small careful conversation, in the position of a man who had come to listen. I have been wanting to speak with you for a long time, sir. You have been wanting to kill me. I have not. I have been wanting to speak with you. The killing, if it comes in its own time, and is, in the small careful reading of the line, almost certainly not within my power to perform tonight. You have, in the long careful method of your making, set yourself outside the small careful reaching of a man's hand. We are not, on the evening, here to undo that. We are here to talk. I will not be talked to. You will. You have, in the long careful method of your making, never been talked to by an equal. You have not had one. We are, on the evening, in the small reading of the line, two of a category. There is no one else in the category at present. You will, in the small reading of the line, be talked to by the only person in the world who is in the category with you. He looked at the bundle in the long grass. He did, in the long careful method, the unhurried thing of beginning to speak. You have, in the long careful method of your making, decided that death is an enemy. You have decided that you would rather not be defeated by it. You have, in the small mean method, broken yourself into pieces in order to be safe from it. You have, in the small mean reading, mistaken pieces for life. The pieces you have made are not you. They are small mean fragments of a man who was, before he made them, capable of a great many things. The man who was capable of a great many things is, in the long careful reading of the line, my equal in some particulars. The pieces are not. I shall be whole again. You shall not, in the strict sense, ever be whole again. You shall at best become a body that holds the pieces that remain. The pieces on the evening are 6. We have, in the long careful method, accounted for 2. We have a plan for 3 more. The 6th is in my son. The 6th we shall remove with the small careful method we have prepared for it. The body you are about to enter, you shall not on the evening enter. There shall be, in our country, a small careful watching from this night for a year, and the small mean attempts you shall make to replace the body shall be small, and shall be undone in the small, careful method of the line. We are agreed. We are not. We are agreed, sir, in the small, careful method of agreements made by one party with the heir. The heir, in its way, signs. The bundle, in the long grass, hissed. The hiss, in the small reading of the line, was the hiss of a small, mean thing that had begun, in the small, mean way, to understand that the line had been ahead of it, in the small, careful method, by some considerable time. You will, in the long, careful method of the line, be tired before we kill you. You will be tired in the way a man is tired who has spent 70 years refusing to put down a thing he has been carrying. We have, in the small, careful method of the line, watched a great many men put the thing down at the end. The end has been, in our long observation, the kindest part of the carrying. We shall, when the time comes, offer you the small, careful courtesy of the end in the small, careful method of the line. You shall not, I do not wish. You wish to refuse the end? Yes, you have, in the long, careful method of your making, told yourself that the wish is a great wish. It is not. It is a small, mean wish. It is the wish of a child who has, in the small, careful method of a child, refused his bedtime. We have, in our line, raised a small one. We have, in the small, careful method of raising him, taught him the difference between a small, mean wish and a great wish. He has, in the careful method of his lessons, learned, you have not. The bundle in the long grass hissed, Dracula, you speak like a man whose son is at his shoulder. Yes, I am that. I have on the evening my son at my shoulder. I have on the evening my other son at my other shoulder. I have on the evening a brother in spirit at my other shoulder. I have on the evening a great many shoulders behind me. You have, on the evening, the small mean shoulders of a small unfinished body in a long grass, and the small remaining ragged circle that did not have the sense to leave. We are not, in the small careful reading of the line, in the same place. We are, in the small careful reading, in two places that look like one. I shall, in my place, do the small careful thing the line has been preparing. You shall, in your place, do the small mean thing you have been preparing. The thing the line shall do is greater than the thing you shall do. We are agreed. You shall. I shall, in the small careful method, put my hand on your shoulder. The bundle in the long grass in the small unfinished body hissed. The Count, in the long careful method, lifted his hand. He laid it, in the small precise method, on the small unfinished shoulder of the small unfinished body. He did not, in the strict sense, press. He did not, in the strict sense, take. He laid the hand the way a father lays his hand on a son's shoulder at the end of a long evening. He laid the hand the way a friend lays his hand on a friend's shoulder at a wake. He laid the hand the way an old man, who has carried a great many small careful things in his life, lays his hand on the shoulder of a smaller, older thing that has, for a great many years, been refusing to be laid hand on. He spoke, in Old Slavic. He spoke, in the small careful method, the sentence that, in the small careful reading of the line, was the sentence the small mean thing had been refusing, in the long careful method of its making, to hear for 70 years. Nico ni jivi tako jugo kaujal, no one lives as long as grief. The graveyard, between one heartbeat and the next, went silent. The silence was not, in the strict sense, the silence of a graveyard. The silence was, in the small careful reading, the silence of a sentence that had been told the right way to a person who had been refusing to be told it. The silence was the small careful method of a small mean thing realizing, in the small careful method, that it had spent 70 years building, in its small mean way, a small mean answer to the wrong question. The bundle, in the long grass, did not, in the strict sense, weep. The bundle did not, in the strict sense, have the apparatus for weeping. The bundle, in the small unfinished body, did the small private thing that a small mean thing does when it has been told a sentence it cannot, in the small mean method, hold off any longer. It went, in the long grass, very still, The small unfinished body breathed once. It did not breathe twice. The piece of unhoused soul that had been the bundle's animating thread in the small careful method withdrew. It went up in the small smoky method from the small unfinished body. It hovered in the small mean method at the air over the cauldron. The line around the graveyard did not in the small careful method move on it. The Count, in the long careful method, looked up at the small smoky thing in the air. Lord Voldemort. The small smoky thing in the air did not answer. Go, sir. Go to your other unhoused places. We have on the evening said our sentence to you. You have heard it. You have not, in the strict sense, accepted it. The line, in its great careful patience, will say it to you again. We will say it, in the small careful method, in 2 years, in your full reconstituted body, when we have, by the small careful method, removed the other 4 pieces. We will say it, in the small careful method, in a chamber we shall prepare for it. We will say it, in the small careful method, with you in a position to listen at last. The end, sir, will come at the time the line and the air agree on. It is not on the evening that time. Go, the small smoky thing in the air, in the small mean method, hung. It hung as a man hangs on a stair when he has been spoken to from above and has, in the small mean way, not yet decided whether to mount the next step or descend. It descended. It went, in the small smoky method, out of the graveyard. It went over the wall, the way a small smoky thing goes over a wall, without dignity in the small mean way. The line in the great careful method watched it go. The line in the small careful method made a small note between Adrian and the Count of the direction of its going. The bound man in the long grass, who had been Peter Pettigrew, lay on the cold earth, in the small bound state, breathing in the small private manner of a man who had not, in his life, been on a winning side. Sirius Black at the 4th headstone east walked in his great proud method to the bound man. He stood over him. He looked down at him. He did not, in the strict sense, kick him. He had been 12 years in a cell on the strength of the bound man's small mean choice, and he had, in the 12 years, considered in great detail what he would do to the bound man on the evening of the bound man's bound state. He had, in the long careful method, decided on the morning that he would not do it. He looked at the bound man. He said, Wormtail, Pads, you are going to a different prison. Pads, I am going to your prison. The line has been working on it. I am, by the line's small careful method, going to be free by the end of the autumn. You are going to take my cell. You are going to have, in the cell, 12 years of leisure to think about the small mean choice you made on the 2nd of November in 81. You will not, in the small careful method of the line, like the leisure. The leisure was not designed to be liked. I shall, in the long careful method, write you no letters. I shall, in the long careful method, not visit. I shall, in the long careful method, by the 2nd year of your sentence, have stopped thinking about you. That, in the small careful method of the line, will be your particular punishment. You shall, in the small careful method of the line, be no one's small mean obsession. You shall be alone in the small mean way with yourself. The bound man in the long grass did not answer. He did not, in the strict sense, have anything to answer with serious bent. He set, in the small careful method, his hand for a moment on the bound man's shoulder, in the small careful method the Count had used a few minutes before. He did not, in the strict sense, mean kindness by it. He meant only the small careful method. He straightened. He stepped back. He is yours, Adrian. He is mine. Adrian, in the long careful method, walked to the bound man. He gathered him in the small careful method. He took him out of the lit gate, into a small careful working at the gate that delivered him, in the long careful method, to a cell with a number and a window in the small careful method of a soft west prison that had, on the evening, been informed by Sirius's letter to the headmaster of Hogwarts and the headmaster of Hogwarts' urgent letter to the Minister for Magic that a particular cell would, in the small careful method, by midnight, have a particular occupant in it. The graveyard, in the small careful method of the line, was empty. The cauldron, in the small careful method, had been emptied and overturned. The small fire, in the small careful method, had been put out by cipher, in the small speaker method of putting out a small fire that had been lit with bad intent. The yew tree, by the wall, in the small careful method, had been spoken to by Varney, in the small careful method of a forgemaster who recognized in a tree, planted with bad intent, the small mean cousin of an iron that had been forged with bad intent. The yew tree, by the morning, would be, in the small careful method, a yew tree that had had a small careful word with it. The bone, in the inside pocket of the Count's coat, would be returned by the slow careful evening route to the small earth at the foot of the proper headstone, on the proper night, with the proper words. The line in the small careful method did not, in the small careful method, leave its small careful workings half-finished. The Count, in the long careful method, walked at last to his son. He set, in the small careful method, his hand on the boy's shoulder. He did not, in the strict sense, say anything. He did not need to. The boy, in the small careful method, did not need to be said anything to. They stood, between the cauldron and the lit gate, in the small careful method of a father and a son who had, in the long careful method, been preparing for this evening for 13.5 years. Tartar, my son, he has gone. He has, in the small careful method, gone. He shall, in the small careful method, return. We shall, in the small careful method, meet him again. We shall, in the small careful method, by then have made the meeting easier on him and on us. We are agreed. We are agreed, my son. Yes, Tartar, be alive, be good, be kind. The boy, in the small careful method, did not, in the strict sense, weep. He did the small careful thing the line did. He inclined his head, the small precise inclination of a son of the line at the end of a long evening. The Count returned the inclination. The line, around the graveyard, in the great careful method, inclined the small precise inclination as well, in the small careful coordinated method of the line at the conclusion of a small careful evening's work. They went home. They went home in the small careful method of a small careful working, by way of Adrian's small portal at the south wall, which had, in the small careful method, opened. They walked, in the small careful method, through it. They came out, in the small careful method, in the courtyard of the castle. In the gallery, in the high window of the library, a small candle had been lit by Hector before they had gone, in the small careful method of the household, which preferred that there be, on the night the line went out, a small candle in the high window for the line to come home to. The candle, in the small careful method, was still burning. The candle on the night had not, in the small careful method, been blown. The boy in the courtyard looked up at the candle in the high window. He inclined his head, the small precise inclination. The candle, in the small careful method, did not, in the strict sense, return the inclination, but in the small careful method. The flame on its small careful wick lifted a quarter flame in the small careful method of a flame that recognized, in the small careful method, that the line had come home. The boy in the small careful method smiled. The smile, in the small careful method, was the smile of a small composed Wallachian potter who had, in the small careful method of the line, learned at the age of 14 the small careful method of a small careful evening. The line, in the small careful method, went in. In the library, in the southeast chair, the boy sat. He set the wand on the small table. He drew from inside his shirt the locket. He opened it. He read in the small careful method the small careful letter, "If you are reading this, my small one, I am dead and you are still alive. Be alive. Be good, be kind, find a person and let them love you, let them." Lily, he closed the locket. He set it, in the small careful method, against his sternum with the back of his thumb. He looked, in the small careful method, at his father, who was in the dignified chair, and at his brother, who was at the long table with a book open in front of him that he was not reading, and at his godfather, who was in the warm chair, and at Hector and Isaac and Varney and Cypher and Trevor, who were, in the small, careful method, on the long bench by the wall, in a small line, drinking tea from cups Hector had set out. He smiled the small, careful smile. "Tartar, my son, I am at home. You are at home." The line, in the great careful method at last, was quiet. And, in the small, careful method, the small candle in the high window of the library, with a quarter flame more than it had had in the small, careful method of the household's setting it, kept its small, careful watch over the long, careful house. Into and through the small, careful method of a long, careful Wallachia night, Hector set a plate of bread at Harry's elbow. He poured a cup of something warm. He laid it down without commentary. He went back to the bench, serious, in the warm chair, looked at Harry over the rim of his own cup. "Kid. Godfather, that what you did, the inclination, I have not been taught it. I shall this autumn ask your father to teach me. I should like in time to incline correctly at the boys I shall someday have at my own shoulders. You shall have the boys, godfather." The line is, on the matter, in agreement. Sirius laughed. The laugh was, in the small, careful method of a man who had, in his 35 years, not been allowed much laughing, the kind of laugh that did not, in the strict sense, stop where it had been intended to stop. The library, in the small, careful method, did not, on the evening, mind. The library had heard a great many laughs in 4 centuries. It welcomed a new one. Adrian, at the long table, closed the book he had not been reading. He came around the table. He set, in the small, careful method, his hand for a moment on his brother's shoulder, the inclination of a brother at the end of an evening's freight. You did well. Tartar did well. We did well. The line did well. Eat your bread." He ate the bread. He drank the warm thing in the cup, which Hector, in the small, careful method, had made with honey. He set the cup down. He looked, in the small, careful method, at the small line of household on the bench by the wall, who had, in the small, careful method, drunk their tea, and who were, in the small, careful method, beginning to drift to bed. Varney, in his small, careful method, set on the small table by Harry's chair a small object. It was a small iron token, beaten thin, with a coiled dragon on it, the same kind of token he had set above the door of the boy's room on the second night of the boy's life in the house. The new token was, in the small, careful method, larger. It was the small, careful method of a forgemaster who had, in the small, careful method, judged that the boy had, on the evening, grown a small, careful measure into a small, careful, larger token. Varney did not, in the strict sense, say anything by way of presenting it. He set it down. He inclined his head, the small, precise inclination, the only word Varney spoke in any company. He went off to bed. Isaac, in the long, careful method, paused at the door. He looked at Harry. He looked at the Count. He inclined his head a quarter inch. He went. Cypher, in the small, careful method, stood at the door. She kissed Harry's forehead in the way she had kissed it on the day she had ridden away from the castle at his 7th year. She said, in Old Slavic, the small line a speaker says to a small, composed pupil who has, in the small, careful method, completed a small, careful lesson at last. She rode out, by midnight, with 2 of her cousins and Trevor Belmont, who had a long ride to his keep, and a longer ride after that to a small, careful in outside Sevastopol where, in the small, careful method, a small, bushy-haired niece would, on the small, careful evening, finally permit her uncle to drink a small, careful cup with her. The Count, at his desk, in the small, careful method, wrote the small, careful letter to the headmaster of Hogwarts that the small, careful method required at the end of a small, careful evening. He folded it. He sealed it in red, with the dragon coiled into a circle. He set it in the small basket by the door, in the small, careful method, where the owl would, in the morning, take it west. He stood. He came to the southeast chair. He set, in the small, careful method, his hand on his son's head. He did not, in the strict sense, say anything. He did not need to. The candle in the high window kept its small, careful watch. The boy, in the southeast chair, in the small, careful method of a small, composed Wallachian potter who had, on the evening, walked through a graveyard at the side of his father, closed his eyes for a small, careful moment, in the small, careful method of a son who, at the age of 14, had, in the small, careful method, learned the small, careful method of a long, careful house. He opened them. He smiled the small, careful smile. He said, in the small, careful method, the small, careful word, Tata.